Well, it's just gone for 5:30 and welcome to Rugby Borough Council's Planning Committee meeting this Wednesday the 7th of December. I'm Councillor Tony Gillis, the Chairman of this committee. The meeting is being web streamed to the public through the Council's YouTube channel, and during the meeting, when asked to speak, please use the push the talk button after you've raised your hand to signify you want to speak, and that's on the microphone in front of you. This will allow the camera to pan in your general direction and everyone to hear. So don't forget to point the microphone towards where your mouth is. Before we begin the formal agenda, I'm obliged to read out the following fire notice. There is no fire drill scheduled in the building this evening. If the fire alarm sounds, then please could I ask that you make your way out of the building, down the main staircase and out of the main doors of the Town Hall and congregate at the entrance to Caldecott Park. An officer of the council will give instructions on when it is safe to return to the building. Moving on to the formal agenda, the first item of the business is to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of November 2022. All those in favour, please show. Okay, that's carried. Second item is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence?
We have 3 apologies for tonight's meeting from Councillors Mrs Brown, Eccleston and Mrs Maudis. Councillor Mistry is substituting from Councillor Mrs Brown. Thank you, Chair. Thank
you. Declarations of interest. To receive declarations of interest as defined by the Council's Code of Conduct for members. A. Non-pecuniary interests. Councillor Willis.
Thank you, Chair. Item 4, application R220500, Ward Councillor for Woolston and the Lawfords. Thank you.
Councillor Toby Lawrence.
Item 1, just of historic, ex-Residents Park Road, ex-Residents Association for Park Road.
Thank you. And one for myself on item 6 on the agenda as a ward councillor. No more non-pecuniary? Any pecuniary interests? Anything under C, notice under section 106 Local Government Finance Act 1992? All clear on that? Okay. Before we move on to items for consideration, I'll just read out the rules and regulations for speaking. The planning officer will speak first and present the application. The representatives for the objectors, the applicants and then the ward councillor will each be invited to speak. After each speaker, the committee members will be asked if they have any points of clarification and only points of clarification from the speaker. Any ward councillor or member who speaks on an application as part of the public speaking process shall leave the meeting once all speakers have completed their presentations relating to it. Members of the committee will then go into debate on the application, asking the relevant questions of the planning officer if necessary. A formal recommendation will be made and voted upon. So the rules for public speaking. Speakers will have 3 minutes to make their presentation. They will be warned by a short alarm when they have 30 seconds left, and then a further alarm will sound when their time has expired. Their presentation then shall be brought to a halt. No extra time will be allowed. All speakers should direct their presentations to amplifying the planning matters they have previously put to us for the benefit of the Planning Committee. Speakers should restrict their comments to material planning considerations only. Any non-planning issues will be disregarded. Speakers should not introduce any additional information that has not been previously brought to the planning authority's attention, i.e. introduce late items that have not been suitably considered by the officers and properly addressed in the officer's report to the Planning Committee for the members' deliberation. No visual aids or handouts may be used, and no questions to officers or members will be allowed. No members of the public are allowed to take part in the debate once their presentation has been given. So now we'll move on then to items for consideration, and the first one is with Ewan, and that's 39 Park Road, Rugby.
Good evening. This is a full planning application reference number R22/0778 at 39 Park Road. for the change of use from a dwelling generous and alterations. The application is being reported to the Planning Committee in accordance with a scheme of delegation, as more than 15 letters of objection from households residing in the locality of the application site have been received. Here is the site location plan. The application dwelling is an end of terrace 3-storey property. The property has an existing flat roof dormer on the front-facing roof slope. It should be noted first that not all conversions of residential properties to HMO require planning permission. A change of use of a small HMO defined as being occupied between 3 and 6 individuals does not require planning permission. Therefore, only changing the use of a dwelling to a HMO with more than 6 residents requires planning permission. This is an aerial photo, shows the location of the site in the context of the surrounding streets. To the rear of the site is an alleyway accessed from Wood Street, which provides vehicle access to the garages serving some properties on Park Road and Sycamore Grove. Here we have some site photos. Photo 1 shows the front elevation of the application site. Photo 2 is taken outside the application site along Park Road towards the town centre. And photo 3 shows the rear of the property. We have some more site photos on this slide. Photo 1 is a photo taken along the alleyway to the rear of the site towards Wood Street. Photo 2 shows the garage associated to 39 Park Road, accessed from the alleyway. And photo 3 shows the approximate location of the bicycle storage shed. In terms of relevant planning history, application R21/1249 was received towards the end of last year for the change of use into a 9-bedroom HMO. The existing garage was to be converted into a bedroom and an ensuite. There was also going to be a first floor extension to the single-storey element to the rear, and there were alterations to the fenestration to accommodate the internal layout. This was, however, withdrawn in March of this year. Moving on to this application, the majority of the works are internal, which do not require planning permission. The ground floor will comprise of 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a dining area, a WC and a shower room. The first floor is to comprise of 3 bedrooms, a bathroom and a separate WC. 1 bedroom is proposed on the second floor. It's been confirmed that the HMO will contain 5 double bedrooms and 1 single bedroom. Assuming all the double bedrooms are filled with couples and a single occupant in the single bedroom, there will be a maximum of 11 residents. In terms of external alterations, the corrugated sheet roof on the single-storey element has been removed and the roof has been reconstructed with matching roof tiles. The corrugated sheet roof in the garage has also been removed and reconstructed with felt, and the eaves and soffits and gutters have also been replaced to match existing. Here we have the second floor plan and a plan of the bicycle storage shed with elevations. So a bicycle storage shed is proposed between the rear elevation of the property and the garage. The timber shed will have dimensions of approximately a width of 1.8 metres, a length of 2.4 metres, an eaves height of 1.8 metres, and a monopitched roof ridge height of 2.1 metres. The shed will accommodate between 6 and 8 bicycles and garden equipment. The bicycle shed could be achieved under permitted development. In terms of technical consultee responses, the Highway Authority have no objection. The Warwickshire County Council College Department have recommended 3 informatives. Environmental Health have no objection, subject to a condition, and 4 informatives, and the Work Services have recommended an informative. In terms of neighbour comments, 21 household objections have been received. A summary of the objections received can be seen in the bullet points below. They mostly concern rubbish, things to do with the occupiers of the HMO, the harmful effect that a lack of maintenance can do if not properly maintained, and to do with parking and highway safety. In terms of the principle of development, the site is located within Rugby Town, which is the most sustainable location in the borough. It has a high access, well, the best access to a range of services and facilities, and is the main focus for all development. In terms of character and design, minimal external works are proposed and the replacement roofs on the single-storey element and the garage are considered to be improvements. The external alterations and the bicycle storage shed are to the rear of the property and will not have a significant impact on the character and appearance of the area. In terms of impact on residential amenity, the external alterations will not impact the residential amenities of the surrounding properties. When considering the location of the bicycle shed in relation to the existing garages, its height, the existing built form and the sun path, the bicycle shed will not cause significant loss of light to any adjoining properties, and it could be built under permitted development as previously mentioned. The external amenity space is considered to be of an acceptable size for the occupants. The HMO will be subject to a separate licensing process to ensure compliance with legislation separate to planning. Any noise, waste, parking or antisocial behaviour complaints would be dealt with separately. Moving on to highway safety and parking, Section 9 of the MPPF states that the development should only be refused on highway grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety or the residual cumulative impacts on the road network would be severe. In terms of parking standards within the local plan states that each HMO will be considered on its own merits. The existing garage provides a car parking space for a small vehicle. Park Road and the surrounding roads are permit controlled. Each property, regardless of its use as a HMO or a C3 dwelling house, is eligible for 3 permits plus a visitor permit. The Highway Authority have no objection to the application. Park Road has designated parking bays along with adequate junction protection in the form of double yellow lines and other TROs to ensure vehicles do not park where they should not. The proposal will therefore not have a detrimental impact on highway safety. It is acknowledged that the property may have an increase in the number of occupants over the current use, which may increase the number of associated vehicles to 39 Park Road. However, the permit controls will likely mean the number of vehicles associated to 39 Park Road will not exceed the number of permits available to the property, despite the parking restrictions only applying between the hours of Monday to Saturday, 8 AM to 8 PM. This is because residents are unlikely to alter their lifestyle to cater to these parking restrictions. Vehicles without a permit can, however, park along Park Road outside of these hours, which may potentially cause residents along Park Road to park a short walk away from their properties. The proposal has the potential to cause a minimal additional impact on this matter, and it's seen to be an amenity issue rather than a highway safety issue. The site is located in a sustainable area in close proximity to the town centre, with access to an array of services and facilities accessible by foot, bicycle or public transport. The bicycle shed can accommodate between 6 and 8 bicycles, which reduces the reliance on the private car. In terms of ecological considerations, it is not anticipated to impact upon protected species, and a condition is recommended to ensure the development is air quality neutral or to secure appropriate mitigation. In terms of the planning balance, the site is located within the most sustainable location in the borough, with access to a range of services and facilities. Only minor external works are proposed, which will not have a significant impact on the character and appearance of the area. The proposals would not have an unduly detrimental impact on the amenities of the surrounding properties. The proposals are unlikely to have a detrimental impact on highway safety and operation, and the development complies with the local plan and the MPPF. The recommendation is therefore to approve the application subject to conditions and informatives set out in the draft decision noted appended to the officer report. We do recommend an additional informative to be added to the decision notice to read that the occupiers of the HMO should dispose of waste appropriately in the bins provided within the site. Thank you.
Have we got any points of clarification from the members of the officer? Councillor Mystery.
Thank you, Chair. On the officer description of under 2, site and surrounding area, I've just been down to visit, and I know that area very well. It says on it that next to the townhouse, to the north of the application site, is a bungalow at 41A Park Road. If you have a look at the drawing, and that bungalow is part of that, the property 41. It's not a separate bungalow. So can you just have a look at the first picture, the plan, and clarification on it?
Is this in relation to it saying 39A on the site location plan?
But it says 41A.
Yeah, that's a mistake on the site location plan. Where it says 39A, that should be 41A. It's a bungalow associated to number 41. It's outside of the application site.
Sorry about the delay between switching from one to the other, otherwise it won't go on the live stream properly, so we've got to have a delay of 10 seconds between we move from the pictures to the cameras. Any more points of clarification? Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, environmental health report and the informative. You did mention it needed strengthening. My concern is the more people one has living in the dwelling, the more waste they generate. The more waste they generate, the higher likelihood is one could get rodent infestation if the bins are not large enough and secure enough to put waste into. So can we make the informative a little bit more robust than the one-liner that's there at the moment?
What we'll do when we get into the debate, Councillor Sanderson, we'll talk about that then, because we're just talking about points of clarification at the moment, but we've got the message. Thank you. Right, we're going to move on now to our speakers, and the next the objector registered is Mr. Nick Allen.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, members. My name is Nick Allen. I live at 99 Wood Street. If you go back to the plan, you can see where my property is, and I'll be able to show it to you shortly. So 39 Park Road and 99 Wood Street share a communal rear garden access path off Park Road. I support Councillor Sanderson's comment there about the excess rubbish. It is a very narrow pathway between the properties, and I'm concerned that potentially it could be used to sort of leave excess rubbish that's not discarded appropriately. And the summary of the objections within the planning report gather the views of the local residents that I'm familiar with. But I'm here to raise a specific objection, and there are two particularly. Firstly, work has been going on this property now for some time. These are antisocial times of the day and a week. I don't share a wall with this property, but I can hear the works across my garden into the house. I don't believe these to be the attributes of a good developer. A further issue just being raised is in relation to the parking bays on Park Road. The parking bays on Park Road are not observed by drivers and other people using vehicles. I've made my objections to the Highway Authority many times. The passing bays on Park Road are often used by vehicles. My concern is that extra vehicles on the road will only exacerbate this further. As you may have seen, if you go down Park Road, the vehicles parked on both sides, it can be very difficult to traverse if cars are parked on both sides all the time. My main objection is about the construction of the cycle shed within the rear garden of the property. The image that was brought up by the planning officer is the first time I've seen that image, actually, because it's not even on the council's planning authority website. As I explained, we have a rear garden access path as a route. And I support the use of sustainable means through cycles, but my concern is about the height of the cycle shed. And also, I'd like to sort of question whether or not they need to have a cycle shed when they've got a perfectly usable garage at the rear of the property. The cycle shed will cause a loss of light into the garden. 99 Wood Street and 101 Wood Street are mirror properties of a late traditional Victorian style with the rear extension which houses the kitchen and utility on the ground floor and the bedroom and the bathroom on the first floor. Light into the dining rooms of both properties is via the narrow gap. And my concern is that by building the cycle shed, that will actually reduce light into the rear of the properties, particularly into the dining rooms. No visit has been made to 99 Wood Street to see how that is positioned, and I haven't seen any images from the planning officer or others about how it will look from my back door. Is that everything? Am I allowed to speak any more?
That's it. Time's up. Could I get you to just cancel your microphone, please? So, have we got any points of clarification for the speaker? Or are you going to leave it till the debate? Okay. Okay. So, well, the next we've got the registered supporter. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, Mr. Ali Karimi. Is that correct? Yes. Over to you. 3 minutes.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thanks for the comments. In regard to the environmental issues, we already got a cleaner company in place, and on the day which they're going to collect all the waste, they're going to regularly clean the area. They're going to come every weeks. At the time, which is not fully occupied, every 4 nights, and in the process of the fully occupied, going to become every weeks. And in regard to the alleyway, I wasn't prepared for all that thing. I just saying by head now. I'm making comment on it. There is an alleyway which goes to the back garden, and the shed, I believe, where the bicycle shed is situated, behind that is another garage. So the height of the shed is not going to go much higher, if not at all, higher than the current garage. And in the third point, which at the alley back, we can, at the moment, because I refurbished the garage, as the planner said, I refurbished them. We can occupy 1 car in there, and 1 car might be able to park on the side. But and based on the Rugby Borough Council, there are 3 cars who, from the household, 3 cars can get a permit and 1 for the visitor. So from the point of view of the parking, we won't have any issue. From the cleaning side and environmental, this is a promise I'm going to make. But we already got in place for the cleaner to come clean the stuff. And the alleyway is basically, most of the alleyway, the narrow is narrow anyway, and just for bicycle to go to the shed, and it's a communal use. And the another comment regarding the noise, obviously, is the building work, and when it turns to the DIY and got some small stuff to do, then or we got a burst pipe or something, obviously that we have to get it out of hours builders to come. I do apologize for that, we made it much noise, but sometimes the things happen. So to summarize all that, we got all that covered. We know basically we're not going to make an issue of the people who are going to occupy the property are going to be professionals. I already had a contract with the Bobby speaking, and they already gave to the legal team to provide the tenancy agreement based on the professionals only. So that's going to be all covered. Thank you very much.
Members, do you have any points of Councillor Willis?
Thank you, Mr. Karimi. Just on the objections, which the officer has very helpfully read out for us, can you just, advise the committee how many other HMOs you have? And secondly, if indeed you do have other HMOs, could you just briefly give some headlines in terms of the antisocial behaviours within those HMOs and how they have been managed? Thank you.
But I don't have any old HMOs. I've got all the properties which is let out to the families. It's not my profession job, just I'm doing a property to just you know, especially with the HMO, because of the time of living and the current situation, I've tried to help out. It's not my basically main sort of profession. So from the
Can I just confirm that you're not should we say, a professional landlord of HMOs?
not a professional landlord of HMO. That's for that reason I'm giving the management of these HMO, because it's my first HMO, to a fully managed estate agent, which they covered several other HMOs, and I can give all the details soon they get the tenancy agreement in place. So I'm a professional landlord, but not in towards of a HMO.
Right. I think it'd be helpful to know who that estate agent is and what their management policy will be.
Carter and King, they are who at the moment are handed the key and they're supposed to basically file the tenancy agreement, and they said they're going to be and soon be ready. I think the Carter and King, but they're based in Rugby, I think, or Dunchurch, not far from here.
No, we know where Dunchurch is. Thank you.
But not there, because I meant the estate agent.
We've just got a few words from Sarah.
Just a point of clarification for members of Planning Committee, the identity or how the business is conducted going forward is not a material planning consideration. That will be a matter for the licensing regime, which is separate to your planning considerations.
Any more points of clarification? Councillor Slinger.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Karimi. Can I ask why you want to install a cycle shed for 6 to 8 bicycles?
Yes, of course. Obviously, in my point of view, most of if they're going to be like people come HMO, and it's because it's close to the town, might the one use a cycle. Is it like a convenience, as well as might not people who are using the HMO might not drive a cars. So there's a two points in that. One, for the close to town, they can park the car and just use a cycle for just the greener environment, and the second one for the more convenience for storing their bikes and in the secure space.
Thank you. So you would you anticipate that they are mostly going to be cyclists, or would they perhaps be likely to drive cars?
Well, I don't want to discriminate in that area. I'm going to occupy people who only use a bicycle, but it's there for the convenience. They might have a car. Myself, I use a car and I've got a bike. But when going around the town, I mainly use a bicycle, but I use a car for the different long distances.
Thank you.
Any further points of clarification? Councillor Daly and then Councillor Mystery.
Hi, hi there. Just a quick question. This was in the officer's report, but I just want to double check. Are you expecting there to be 11 people living in this 4-bedroom end of terrace house?
But the facility, the application is for 11 people. The facility is for 10 people. That's what we're hoping to get 10 people in. But it's a 6-room, and they are quite spacious, quite big property. I'm already going through this with my basically management team. It's going to be between a 6 and maximum 10, but 6 is basically more convenient than 10, but it's a possibility. If the couple come, we don't want to just say, okay, no, but it's just there for the use, really.
No more points of... Councillor Mystery.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to go back to the concern raised by the residents, back to the bicycle shade or whatever you want to call it, a hut. Clearly, the officers made a point that the height, the existing built Foreman's Son path, is considered that the proposed cycle shed will not cause significant loss of light to any adjoining property. Clearly, the residents have raised concern that it will have an impact. So I would like to ask the officer on what basis or scientific basis. On what basis has the officers based that assumption that it won't have significant impact on the residents? Because clearly the resident has raised an issue that it will have an impact.
Yeah, so we've only had one resident concern to do with the loss of light to the bicycle storage shed from the speaker. Essentially, we have to consider whether the bicycle shed will cause loss of light, and in that consideration we have to take into account the existing built form. Like the applicant has already mentioned, there is a garage right next to the bicycle storage shed that will already, well, the bicycle shed will project slightly above the garage, but in total the shed won't cause loss of light. And we've got to remember, the bicycle storage shed can be built under permitted development. It's only at a height of 2.1 metres, so given the trajectory of the sun and the sun path, it's not going to cause any detrimental, significant or loss of light to any adjoining property.
Okay, Councillor Mystery again.
Chair, I'm just looking at the draft decisions that we're going to implement. My concern is that we put all these conditions and whether we enforce it, yeah? And the condition is that I'll come back to the next item. Prior to the first occupation of any room, condition 3, the cycle shed indicated in the drawing, blah, 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 shall be implemented and made available for use at a time. So who is going to enforce it? That is a condition that will be taken on board. First question.
Can I just cut in there? I want to just we're on points of clarification, and I want to get all the speakers through, and then when we get into the debate, then we can get down to the nitty gritty. Then is that okay?
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
I just want to hear all the speakers, and I want to hear the ward councillor. He's itching to say something. So that's it. Councillor Harrington, it's over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the Ben residents, including Park Road, Wood Street and Sycamore Grove, and that's where I live myself. Residents do know we need HMOs required within our area because we have poor affordable housing. So currently, looking at the figures, we've got 192 HMO properties which are registered in Rugby. Currently, there's 116 in Ben Ward. That's 60%. We've got the highest share of any ward within Rugby. Currently on the road itself, Park Road, you have 5 HMOs. You have 2 social services houses for emergency accommodation. Plus you have flats, and plus you've got a so-called B&B, might be a HMO, but nothing's been investigated for that. The residents I was speaking to, enough is enough. We've had 21 objections in tonight, and we have got a problem within our area. Major issues which have already been said regarding antisocial behaviour, and the biggest thing is facilities and parking. I've tried to get the county council to give me some data from 8 o'clock at night to 8 o'clock in the morning. What data is there? On numerous occasions, I've had nothing. So at the moment, you may have free cars and a visitor, but you've got possibly 10 people in there. They might have 10 different families. They might have 10 different sets of friends. And you're going to push people parking into my street, you're going to Wood Street, you're just going to push everyone away because they can't get onto the road they pay the money to actually for the permit for. So I don't agree that actually, the facilities are going to be any better. It's going to be worse off having this HMO because you can't. HMO and a house are completely different. A house, you'll have 2 people and maybe 2 sets of family and friends. You're not going to have like maybe up to 10. Also as well, the residents concerned, they're concerned about HMOs which are not registered, are under the permitted 5 or under 6. I emailed officers this week and there's no data. So for me, if you've got no data what's out of hours parking, you've got no data for HMOs, and what the resident said clearly there, and I totally agree with him. I've been stuck at the bottom of Wood Street onto Park Road for a good 5 minutes trying to get up the road. Now, if you've got fire engines, you've got ambulances and things like that, you're going to cause a massive issue, and that could be a life and death situation. So, summing up, really, I think we need to look at it a different way. I know in the 6th we will probably get passed through because that's the actual law itself from government, but I think the problem is if you keep ignoring the residents, they're just going to get turned off by this, and I think you need to start listening. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Now, members, have we got any points of clarification to the councillor, the ward councillor? If we haven't, we'll then move into the... Yeah. There you go. Okay, now we've got a highways officer here, if we can move into debate, and who wishes to speak first? Councillor Willis.
Thank you, Chair. I go to 15.1 of the report, and as the officer has pointed out, objections have been received with concerns over the number of HMOs in the area, which echoes Councillor Harrington's point. But then he goes on to point out, or it points out in the report, there is no policy position or constraint that would prevent further changes of use from houses to multiple occupation accommodation. We've heard the figures, 116 HMOs in Ben Ward. We don't have a policy that we can apply, and again I think the councillor rightly was pointing out there that we have the issue of 3 parking permits per house and visitors. Occupation of 10, 11, you do the numbers. I don't think we can expect people to cycle to work. Is that a cover? The question is, and I think it is not, and this is a question I think that we all need to look at and address, when are we going to get a robust policy in place to address all the issues that have been raised in this chamber tonight? And that's possibly to our planning officers, to our head of planning in terms of that. Because without that, it's very difficult to enter into meaningful debate. Thank you.
We'll go to Richard Holt.
Okay, yeah, through you, Chair. I think members are aware this is a matter that has been discussed quite a few times in this chamber. The council has commissioned a report to look at HMOs at Rugby, and this will start to form the evidence base for the local plan for when it is reviewed. Unfortunately, we can't just introduce a new policy without going through a review of the local plan, you know, whether that's through an SPD or whether that's through additional guidance or documentation. So unfortunately, you know, we have the policies we have. The local plan was adopted in 2019. We're well aware of members' concerns, and this is why we're building the evidence base. So when we do come to look at doing a review, you know, this can be one of the policies and areas that we do look at. But at the moment, we have what we have, unfortunately.
Thank you, Richard.
Councillor Bill Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. It would be useful, a new policy, but that's going to take quite a long time. In the meantime, we're getting lots of applications in for HMOs. I'd be interested in some figures maybe of how many the council's received in the last 12 months, how many of those have been refused, how many approved, and how many are still waiting to be debated.
Okay, yeah, through you, Chair. What I can tell you is since the 2nd of November last year, we've received 10 valid HMO applications. 5 of those have been approved, 1 has been withdrawn, and 4 are pending. Obviously includes 2 on the agenda tonight. The other one is at 46 Grosvenor Road, and the other is at 50 Windsor Street. And all of these are around the Rugby town sort of centre, the sort of the urban area.
Thank you. So none have been refused?
That's correct, none have been refused.
Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. I think we mustn't fall into the trap tonight to try to write policy on the hoof. That will not work. We have to go through the review process. On saying that, however, on each of these applications, they have to be judged on their merits. And if we condition them well, they should not be a problem locally. But that's about good conditioning and enforcement via environmental health. And I think that's the thing we've got to concentrate, Chair, on. Good conditions on the applications we have before us, backed up by good work from the Environmental Health Department.
Have we got any further? Right, Councillor Srivastafa.
I think one of the things we talked about, this area is very busy. If you drive in the morning, the Park Road is very difficult to handle driving-wise. Now the comment is, I think to me the character of the area is changing. In that respect, people bought the houses long time ago. 21 people objections. They bought the houses as a kind of family-oriented, neighborhood-friendly system. But those things are disappearing. And coming back to this, I think already Sarah has commented, a lot of things are connected to licensing issues. I think some of the antisocial behavior, when it happens, middle of the night, you can't contact police, you can't contact police. Whom do you, sometimes they don't know, some of the bin collections. If you go on the walk up the roads, there are going to be 11 people living there, there will be bin collections. Number of bins will increase. They leave it on the pathway, and nobody moves. There are other things like environmental things. So as they point, and also when they complain, the response time is very, very difficult. They have to wait, they have to suffer. So I don't know whether this can be covered on the conditions. A lot of issues are licensing issues, as officer has said. But this, when it comes to implementation, people living in the area, they suffer. Can be put some conditions on that, that's what I'm saying.
I think you raise a good point. I think there is a separate licensing process to ensure that the HMO is properly managed and to make sure the HMO is suitable for the number of occupants within. In terms of noise, I mean, yes, they can phone the police or get in touch with our environmental health team, but I'm not sure it's something we can necessarily condition. To be honest with you, I might be wrong on that, but.
Councillor Slinger.
Thank you, Chair. When looking at the evidence in this report, going from a 4-bedroom house that we might imagine would have parents and perhaps 2 or 3 children, so you're talking about a maximum of 5 people. You're talking about likelihood on average of maybe 3 adults before they leave, maybe 4. And then, according to this report, we're talking about going up to a maximum of 11, I think I'm right in saying, adults, 11 residents. So many of them are going to be adults. And it just seems to me, reading through the evidence that or the report, that it cannot be easily said that won't have a detrimental impact upon issues such as parking. I mean, it just seems quite an obvious point that if you go from a household with 1, maybe 2 cars, to a household with 10 or 11 residents, most of whom are going to be adults, that will cause an additional pressure on local parking, and that, among the other concerns that residents have raised, such as the gentleman here, must weigh on our minds. But I would like to ask for some expert advice around, given that lots is coming down the track, shall we say, and I have been involved in those debates, as people know, in the chamber. Lots is coming down the track around this matter of public record, around the new local plan, around various mechanisms to limit the number of HMOs in a particular area. It's not happened yet, but I'd be very grateful for the officer to give a little bit of advice on the nature of the grounds that can be used for taking into proper consideration residents' concerns in order to reject such applications.
Thanks for those comments, Councillor Zinger. Before we move on to Councillor Mistry, we'll bring in the... Could we bring in Karen Watkins, the Highways Officer? Are you prepared to respond to some of those concerns?
Good evening, Chair. Sorry, I wasn't the case, or I haven't been the case officer of this application, but I'm familiar with a number of similar applications we've had in the last 20 years in Warwick District Council. And there were similar concerns raised about the impact it would have on parking in these areas. We have asked for surveys, traffic surveys to be, or parking surveys to be undertaken. The difficulty is the parking surveys will only generally indicate the parking stress in an area. It may show that there is some parking that is available. It may show some areas that are well over 100% parked up, and that will impact on the parking amenity of residents. Now, in terms of highway safety, there won't be an impact. It will be amenity that will be the impact, and unfortunately, our remit doesn't cover the amenity aspect of it. So what the parking survey really does is it enables us to demonstrate to the planning authority that if it shows that there's parking in areas where they shouldn't be parking around junctions, etc., that can be covered by traffic regulation orders, and that's what we would probably recommend at the end of the day on an application, to protect those areas from parking. But then in terms of the general parking within an area, it becomes an amenity, a parking amenity issue, and the local planning authority are the parking authority where that's concerned.
Okay, thanks for that. We've got Councillor Mistry.
Thank you, Chairman. I've seen enough HMO application in the last few months. What I told the officers before, they are just cut and paste, all seems so similar. And listening to the Highway Authority, I can't remember the last time they actually did something, a survey or impact survey to say, you know, there is a detriment. I understand the amenity and it's nothing to do with it. And also when we put conditions on from this Borough Council and officers that, you know, they will do X, Y, and Z, informative, that will impose it. I have not seen clear evidence, you know, that it is carried out. We understand the frustration that we don't have a legislation on HMO to implement some of the things that we should restrict. So on balance, I move that we refuse this application. Second.
Councillor Mistry, you'll have to say what grounds you are proposing refusal.
On the ground that there is very uncertainty that the impact of the property, well, Councillor Slinger mentioned that there is no clarity on number of people who are going to live on it, and the Highway Authority hasn't given clear indication or impact to say why they cannot, you know, be refused.
So just as a point of clarification, before we take that motion forward, I think it's been indicated by both the planning officer and the applicant that it's for a maximum of 11 people that could be housed in there. So there is an indication of how many people could live there. It is very difficult, members, to sustain a refusal on the basis of highways when the Highways Authority has not objected. I'm not saying you can't do it, but you do put us at risk of an adverse cost towards the appeal if we are unsuccessful in defending that. That's just to put you on notice of that.
Councillor Toby Lawrence. Oh.
think if I read ourselves as councillors, members here, we really are not in favour of this particular. We understand we need to look for material conditions. My suggestion is a deferment for us to get additional information about the loss of amenity we will have due to the parking issues. Sorry, I'll start again. Apologies. I think as, if I can speak on behalf of fellow councillors, we are not at a point of vote at the moment, that none of us feel comfortable with the approval of this as an HMO because of the impact of 21 objections, the impact on the local area. I know that area very well, having lived in that area for some time. The question I have, therefore, is that there is a lack of material conditions we have to reject this on, but we also may have a lack of information about the level of amenity that's lost by 11 new residents or 11 new cars in this area. Can we ask for a deferment for that to be investigated?
Yeah, before I just mention, I was going to come back on a point that Councillor Slinger mentioned, actually, and he was talking about, concerns about the proposal. And obviously each application is assessed on its own merits, and whilst members may not necessarily agree with the content of the report and obviously the advice that they've been given, then it is entirely within their right to reach a different decision. And what I'd noted here was actually, I think was what, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but what I think you were mentioning was there was a detrimental impact on parking and residential amenity by resulting from the intensity of the property changing to potentially up to 11 individuals. So I think that was what I got from that. I don't know if I'm correct in that, but I just wanted to make that point. Going back to what Councillor, obviously, Lawrence has said, I'm just a little bit concerned, obviously, we can get a deferment, but it's actually the additional information you want us to actually come back with. Obviously, you've heard from the highway officer that each property, I understand, in a restricted area can apply up to 3 permits plus the visitors. Obviously, that house, whether it's a normal C3 dwelling house or whether it's an HMO, they would have the same number of parking passes. Obviously, that doesn't prevent, obviously, other people potentially parking in an area outside those hours, which I know is what we've had here. I don't know, in the case officer correct me, is whether a parking survey has been done. Whether that's the sort of additional information the council is seeking for us to get back, but I think we may struggle to quantify perhaps any more with regard to what that residential impact is.
If I can return, so there is a possibility of doing a further assessment of parking. I think also there's been a suggestion the road actually gets blocked because there's a lack of passing on that as well. So I do think there are grounds for looking at the traffic situation on that road as well as the parking situation. I don't feel as if I have enough information in front of me at the moment to make that decision.
Okay, thank you for that.
So, Councillor Lawrence, you're still moving deferment then?
At the moment, I'm moving for deferment, but I'm looking to my other councillors to see if it is actually a rejection they would prefer to move instead.
Councillor Slinger.
Mr. Holt expressed my objections more eloquently than I did, so thank you for that. One thing I'd like to ask, if I may, Chair, of Ms. Watkins, is relating to your point about, is that possible to ask her in the debate? Relating to your point about the difficulty of providing sort of scientific evidence that a particular household change of use can result in a certain amount of parking. I think that's what you were saying. It's difficult. You can do a survey, but you can't prove that one particular dwelling is causing a particular issue. But can I ask, have you been able to make any assessments at the county level of roads that have high numbers of HMOs in them as a proportion of the number of properties? and whether those roads do tend to have particular problems around parking.
Thank you. It's slightly getting outside my area. This is something our parking enforcement, civil enforcement team would be involved with rather than ourselves. Questions we can obviously put to them. They did provide some information with regard to the parking take-up within the residence parking zone 2, which Park Road falls into, and they were indicating that there's an average of 1.23 permits per HMO. So they may well have the information if we ask them of that. But the difficulty is we can't stop people owning cars, and it's there's no actual safety issue with parking. It's just where they're going to park, and the knock-on effect of that is not a highway safety one, it is an amenity one. So I don't quite know. We can go into all the words not coming, sorry. We can look into this in quite a lot of detail, but still not come up with the answers you're looking for. I'm afraid it's available road space against demand, and it just will never be there in terraced areas such as Park Road.
Okay, we've got Councillor Sanderson next, and we do know that we have established that amenity is a planning issue.
Right. Thank you, Chair. I agree that amenity is a concern, but clearly, I'm a bit concerned that we are getting onto some very thin ice here, because if we ask for a deferment, then we've got to say to the county, what are we deferring it for? Now, the officers made it clear they can deal with problems around junctions, obstruction, those issues, but whether there's enough parking space in a road is not something they make a decision on. And I would also refer you to some of our local plan documents and our town centre documents, which encourage shifts in modal use from cars to buses to cycles. The applicant could argue that he's making provision for that. So, Chair, if members are moving deferment, let's know what we're deferring for and what we're asking the county to do.
I would just like to summarise on highway safety and parking. I think this, obviously, HMOs are not different to dwelling houses. They get 3 permits plus a visitor permit. There are TROs on Park Road in the form of double yellow lines and other TROs to ensure cars don't park where they should not. On the application site, most terrace properties sometimes don't have a garage. They do have a garage, and it will provide 1 car parking space off-road. That is quite unique in a way compared to some HMOs. In terms of the applicant's been very willing to provide a cycle storage space. It's in a highly accessible location. The town centre is only about 400 metres away. The train station is only probably about 600 metres away. So it's in a highly sustainable location on foot, bicycle and public transport. Public transport is very good in the area. So I think, we've got to be a bit careful on it, to be honest.
Mr. Sirisafa.
Obviously, highway authorities have made an assessment of the traffic issues, how traffic flow. Have they done anything? Have they made any data? The traffic is very busy in those areas, certain times. So any assessment highway authorities have made what the traffic issues are?
Not that I'm aware of, but what we've got to consider is whether this one HMO is going to cause a major or detrimental impact to the traffic in the area. I think the local planning authority and the highway authority it's not going to. So it's whether this one HMO is going to cause a detrimental impact to the highway traffic.
Just another question. Obviously, 11 people there might be some family with the young people. They might not be schooling. I don't know whether it's a materially part or not. But obviously Northland is the only one school, which is very, very pressurized at the moment. Any effect on the educational side of the family, if the families move in those flats? Some might be young people might be moving. So they might face some problem in terms of schooling. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, as part of that application, they don't have to specify the age range of the occupiers of the HMO. So I'm not aware that this one HMO is going to cause a severe stress on educational services in the area. So, yeah.
Okay, we're not moving forward very quickly, are we, on this one? But the objector spoke, and he spoke about the obstruction to his garden of the cycle shed, and we've been told by the officers that would be permitted development anyway. We've also been told about cleaning up the rubbish, and that is an informative. And we've also been told about hours of work as well, and that's an informative. So there wouldn't be any out of hours working. So of the problems raised by the objector, those seem to be addressed in the report. So let's have a bit more discussion on this so we can get to a resolution, please.
Obviously, Councillor Campbell has talked about just if we haven't got HMO policy. We talked about deferring it. Is it possible to defer it? We'll make our own policy first.
No, that wouldn't be possible. We obviously need to determine applications as quickly as we can.
We've got nobody, we've got the proposer for refusal and a proposer for deferment. So let's, somebody make a suggestion, please.
Yeah, I'll move the report as printed so we can get this debate moving forward. I'll propose it if somebody will second it.
Have a seconder?
At the report as printed with the recommendations for approval plus the conditions and additional informatives.
Okay, we've got a seconder for that. We haven't got a seconder there, Neil.
So, sorry, Chair. I put amendment to be for refusal, and I can have a seconder for.
I'll second that.
Sorry, Councillor Mystery, did you say you're going to amend your refusal? Did you say that was an amendment of your refusal? Or, yeah, what are you amending? Because currently we've got a refusal based on Highways objection. What are you putting forward
Okay,
now?
I'll go with the approval, but then we'll vote accordingly.
Councillor Eve Hassel, did you want to say something?
I will second approval.
Okay, so we have a proposer and a seconder for approval. All those in favour, please show. All those against, please show. So that is refused.
No. The motion to approve fails.
No, the motion to approve fails. Sorry, beg your pardon.
We haven't got a seconder for refusal yet.
We haven't got a seconder for refusal.
I will second the motion for refusal.
Okay, and we're sure about the reasons for refusal?
So just to confirm, I have the reason for refusal as on Highways grounds. And that's seconded by
Chair.
Councillor Singer. Okay.
Okay, we'll move to the vote. All those in favour of refusal? That's it. All those against?
Oh, 6. Sorry, could you raise your hands again for refusal? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, all those against refusal, please show.
1, 2. Abstain.
Any abstentions?
2, 3. That carries refusal.
So that is refused. Thank you. Right, the next item for consideration is 95 King Edward Road. And over to Ella.
This application is for the conversion of a 4-bedroom house into a 6-bedroom HMO to house 7 people, including a rear dormer window at 95 King Edward Road in Rugby. The application is being reported to committee as it was called to committee by Councillor Harrington. The application property is a 2-storey end terrace within Rugby town. The site is subject to on-street parking as seen within the photos. Within the street scene, the majority of the dwellings are 2-storey detached terrace dwellings. The site is approximately 0.4 miles from the train station and 0.5 miles from the town centre. Since the publication of the report, there's been one additional letter of objection, which means a total of 5 letters have been received, and they relate to increasing car parking and the assumption that 7 residents will not have cars is not reasonable. Amended plans have been received through the course of the application. The final site plan shows cycle parking to the rear, bin storage to the rear, and a rear dormer window. The proposed elevations show the rear doormat, which would be 3 metres in height, 3.5 metres in depth, and 5.5 metres in width. It's an end terrace, so it would be viewable within the street scene. However, the development could be carried out under permitted development rights if the property was to remain a C3 dwelling. The proposed plans show 2 bedrooms and the communal living space and kitchen area on the ground floor, 3 bedrooms on the first floor, and the loft conversion to have 1 bedroom. They're all single beds except the top room, which would be a double room. Will be conditioned that there will only be 7 occupants within the dwelling. In terms of the principle of development, the site is within Rugby town, therefore there is a principle in favour of sustainable development. In terms of the character of the area, the proposed dormer window is the only external change, and materials would be conditioned to match the existing dwelling. Therefore, it's considered that the character and design of the proposal is acceptable. In terms of residential amenity, there's an external amenity rear space which is retained. The room sizes comply with the national space standards, and the proposed dormer window would not introduce overlooking at the property. There's no other adverse impacts in terms of ecology and air quality as detailed within the officer report. In terms of highway safety, in terms of policy D2, parking is satisfactory as it is subject to on-street parking. Highways have confirmed that there is no objection to the proposal. The use would increase the number of occupants associated with the dwelling with associated vehicles. In terms of parking permits, these are limited to 3 plus a visitor permit, and parking restrictions apply between 8 AM and 8 PM Monday to Saturday in this location. Given the location, accessibility to public transport, proximity to the town centre and provision of cycle parking, this application is considered to be acceptable. Based on this presentation and the information within the officer report, it is considered that the application complies with the development plan and therefore permission should be granted. It is considered that an additional informative should be imposed that will read that the occupiers of the HMO should dispose of waste appropriately in the bins provided within the site, as shown on the proposed site plan.
What we'll do is move on to the speakers, and then we'll keep all the questions and debate at that point. Okay, so we've got Mr. Ray Yim, the applicant, to speak next. You've got 3 minutes.
Good evening, everyone. So my name is Ray, and I represent the applicant. I'll just start off with the context of the planning application. The development works is entirely under permitted development rights and confirmed by the planning department. The application is for a change of use to a 7-person HMO. The property will have 6 bedrooms. There are no objections from technical consultees, work services, highways, ecology and environmental health. I appreciate there are third-party concerns, namely high number of HMOs in the Ben ward. I'd like to point out there are currently no HMOs on King Edward Road. There has also been mentions of detrimental impact from HMOs. Personally speaking, on behalf of our company, we have an impeccable track record, and none of our 6 HMOs in Rugby have ever had a report for antisocial behaviour. All tenants that we take in are vetted extremely carefully, and we also ensure that a character assessment is undertaken for each of the tenants that we take. We also ensure there's full referencing and credit checks. The bins will be stored behind the property in the rear garden. There is side access. I'll also move on to the final key point, which is parking amenity. We have multiple HMOs in Rugby, and our data states that the percentage of tenants with vehicles is an average of 30%. Applying this logic to a 6-bed HMO would equate to just under 2 vehicles that may potentially occupy spaces on the road. This falls under the maximum number of permits allowed for each house under the current permit scheme. We also provide cycle storage, and that's to encourage the tenants to use bicycles rather than cars. I'll summarise by saying that we provide affordable housing of exceptional quality. We have a co-living mindset. We don't just do normal properties because we care about the community. We promote tenants to coexist and go the extra mile. For example, we coordinate welcoming parties for new tenants to ensure that they're comfortable with housemates and have a sense of belonging. We also only allow professional tenants. That's not only just because it's a mortgage stipulation, but it's also because it's a credit to the community. The last point is that we heavily invest in Rugby Town and our local developers. I have personally lived in Rugby for 5 years. Just to give an example, we employ over 20 local professionals, including tradesmen, administration, cleaners. And the final point is our properties are renovated to an extremely high standard and supports policy GP2 of the local plan for sustainable urban extensions. Thank you.
Have we got any questions of clarification from the speaker? Sarah makes one point.
Just a reminder, as for the previous application, the identity of the applicant or the future occupiers of the HMO is irrelevant from a planning considerations point of view.
Okay, then we'll move on to the ward councillor.
Before I start, Chair, there's probably going to be similar bits and pieces from my first speech. Are you okay to repeat that again? Because obviously I don't want to bore you lot over there, sort of thing. So, okay, thank you for the opportunity to speak today on behalf of Ben Ward. As in my previous speech, we have problems with HMOs. 192 properties were in the ward, 116 which were in Ben at 60%. Yes, there's currently no HMOs on that street at the moment, but there is actually, on the plans, there's flats at the corner of Wood Street. So there's about 3 flats there as well, which are not shown on the plans. So I'm a bit concerned of the parking again, and that's the biggest issue in that street, and also bins. I've had to report bins issues down there because residents not bringing them in, or some people leaving them out, and also having more people living at the property, that's going to cause an environmental issue within the street. Thing regarding go back to could be parking again. Now, it's still the same thing. You can park there from 7 p.m. at night to 9 a.m. in the morning without a permit, and there's no data. And until we have that data, I can't prove or disprove we've actually got the facilities actually working there, so we can actually have people there. I've got a couple of friends live down, and they've had to park in 2 streets away to actually get in a parking space, and this is in late at night. And same again, you can have 6 people there, 6 different friends, 6 different families. It's completely different to a normal house, and I don't think the facilities are not there. It is a one-way street, so obviously a little bit better compared to Park Road. But I personally think it's the issue of obviously facilities there. Yes, there's the concern about antisocial behaviour and things like that, and not knowing who lives there is always a concern, especially being a family area. You're right by Northland School, and you've got kids walking up and down that street as well. So for me, it's more of a family area, not a HMO area. But I'm speaking to residents, as I said before, I mean, it's only 5 this time, but this enough is enough. It's 60% of whole of HMOs in one ward. It's far too many. So tonight, hopefully you'll listen from what's going on. And my other previous point is regarding HMOs which are not registered. We still have no data from there. So I understand how we can make any decisions with no data from highways, and actually we don't know how many HMOs are below 5 we've got in Rugby. So you don't know how you can plan facilities and how you can plan for the future of the Ben ward. So for me personally, this is why I'm against this, and the residents are too. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Councillor Harrington. Right, we'll move into the debate then. Ask questions of the applicant if you wish, and the officer. Any speakers? Councillor Sanderson.
Yes, just one question. We've obviously got an adopted local plan, 2019, I believe, and there's a local transport plan on the way. I believe that's due to be finished sometime in September. Yeah. Have officers received any representations to those 2 documents regarding HMOs and their impact on the local environment or parking issues?
Again, Chair, I don't believe the parking element is something... sorry, I don't believe that parking is necessarily an issue in terms of HMOs that would be covered by the local transport plan.
I understand it can be taken into consideration in the local plans. My understanding is it can be taken into consideration when a local plan is being formulated or being reviewed.
Right, I would have to look into that because I'm not actually aware of that, I'm afraid.
In terms of the local plan, in terms of the current local plan, we could have had representations regarding HMOs. However, there is not a policy, as we've heard tonight. In terms of the local plan review, I think, as Richard said for the previous application, we are
I think
looking...
Richard and I were both at the local plan in public hearing, and I don't believe there is any representations made on HMOs to that local plan, though the inspector did ask for that information.
I have to say I wasn't there at all the sittings. Our development strategy team may know more, but obviously, as you're aware, there were quite a few thousand representations made. But obviously, ultimately, if there were any representations made, it obviously was not at a level that resulted in a policy being formed. So I suspect it was a low level. Obviously, things have now moved on because obviously that was quite a few years ago. And HMOs, I think, have become a more prevalent matter for discussion in this chamber since then.
Councillor Mystery.
Thank you, Chair. The applicant referred to, working professional. I assume working professional, the applicant is referring to is anyone who's paid to work, which could in fact be anything from company CEO, part-time labourer, yeah. Most market research, when they talk about professional, as someone who works in a career that involves prolonged training and formal qualification, as such, teaching, finance, etc. While I respect people from all walks of life, regardless of their employment, I would not want the planning committee today to be misled by subconscious image of a polite, clean-cut, respectable...
Councillor Mystery, Councillor Mystery, I've got to stop you there because that's not a planning consideration. It's not a planning consideration, I'm afraid. The legal officer's already stated that.
It was just to reiterate the point, the identity of the occupiers is not a material planning consideration, so irrespective of any clarification Mr Yim is able to provide, it's not something that you can take into account in coming to your decision about this planning application, the identity of the occupiers, because for the simple reason that Mr Yim may not be the long-term owner of this property and it could change next week, next month, depending on who owns the property. So the identity of the occupiers, professional or otherwise, is not a material planning consideration.
Could I just point out that having a long history myself on working on these types of houses right from the early 1970s, it is all about management of the HMO. If you've got the right people in charge, you'll get the right people living in them. I don't mind moving approval from the chair. Councillor Willis.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to second.
Councillor Slinger.
Can I just ask the officer a question first?
Please do.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the presentation. At point 15.1, the report says the proposal would respect the scale and character of the surrounding area, would not adversely affect the amenities of the occupiers of neighbouring properties. I just would be grateful for a clarification on how you came to the conclusion that it won't affect the amenities of neighbours.
Yep, so in terms of the external development, it's just the dormer window, and it's considered that that aspect wouldn't affect the neighbouring dwellings in terms of overlooking or overbearing impact. In terms of the use of the property for the existing residents, for the future residents, there's an external amenity space retained. And in terms of the neighbouring dwellings, there isn't a significant material change in the occupiers of that property that there would be a significant effect on the neighbouring amenity. Also, in addition to objections raised such as antisocial behaviour or bins, as detailed in my report, there is other departments that would deal with that. So the community safety and environmental team, they have powers to look at antisocial behaviour if it does become an issue in the future. And then the same with litter. That's obviously either the enforcement team or the environmental health team as well.
Councillor Silverstaver.
Just a question to the officer. A lot of antisocial behavior issues has been highlighted. Any consultation with Warwickshire Police?
There was not a consultation with the police, no. They wouldn't normally comment on minor applications such as this. So they haven't been consulted, no, but they do have powers to be involved in that situation should it arise in the future, as does our environmental health and community team.
Any further speakers? We've got a proposal. Councillor Mystery.
Thank you, Chair. This application, again, is not different to the one we refused, the last one, because it's only a throne's throw away. And again, the Wood Street and all that area, you know, it is already, you know, to a breaking point, the impact of the traffic and the amenity that goes with it. And my concern is we put all these conditions in and we don't enforce it. That's the problem. Because if you look at the last application, he knows very well, there are things that's not being cleared. It talks about, it's a tick box. You know, when you talk about the bicycle provision to provide, to eliminate, I suppose we've got more cyclists in Rugby than the car users at this rate, where the HMOs are granted. So my issue is with the officers, how we are going to implement, before these people move in, some of the conditions that we have put down, because this one application we did, 19 York Street, hasn't been carried out. There's no bicycle rack, the windows are not frosted, there is an overdevelopment of the dormer. So my worry is that we do a paper exercise and we don't enforce it. So I would like an assurance, because I'm not going to approve this planning application, because it's no different, if it's worse than the other one in terms of the things that have been done. So can the officer explain exactly how they're going to enforce it?
Yeah, so first I'd just like to say that every application should be determined on its own merits. So this report should be looked at in isolation to the one we previously heard or any other HMO application that you're referencing. Secondly, in regards to the conditions, so some are pre-occupation. So for example, the cycle storage, they have to submit details and actually implement the cycle storage, so it has to be in place before anyone can occupy that dwelling. If we're notified of a breach of condition, then our enforcement team will look into that. We don't monitor conditions as such because we grant so many planning applications that we physically do not have the resources to go out and monitor that ourselves. But if it is brought to our attention, then the enforcement team do look into that.
Just one comment, really, Chair. Can we please consider each application in line with what the officer has just said on its own merit? The 116 HMOs in Ben Ward are not all identical. Please, can we have a modicum of common sense around the role we're rolling out tonight? Thank you.
Any more speakers? So we've got a proposer and a mover for, and a seconder for approval. All those in favour, please show. And those against, please show. Sorry. So that's approved.
Abstentions.
Any abstentions? We've got one abstention. Well done. So that's approved. Right, the next item for consideration is land at Padge Hall Farm, Watling Street, Burbage, and we've got Ella again.
This application is for land at Padge Hall Farm. It's a hybrid planning application, so there are two elements to the application. The outline application is for all matters reserved except for access from the A5 for the demolition of the existing structures and the erection of distribution and industrial buildings, including ancillary offices and associated earthworks, infrastructure and landscaping, and highways improvements to the Dodwells roundabouts on the A5. The full part of the application is for the development of a distribution building, which is use class B8, including ancillary offices and associated access, hard standing parking and on-plot landscaping. The proposals include improvements to the existing railway bridge on the A5, including the increased height clearance from the A5. It's a cross-boundary application with Hinckley and Bosworth Borough Council and the Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council. The application is EIA development. The vast majority of the application site is situated within the jurisdiction of Rugby Borough, and a minor part is within the green belts. This plan outlines which areas are for full consideration and which are for outline. The red area shows the full consideration, which includes Unit 1, the access, and the A5 works underneath the railway bridge. The blue area shows the outline part of the application. The site is located on the southwestern edge of Hinckley, adjoining and immediately to the southwest of the A5. The western boundary of the site is defined by the Birmingham-Leicester railway line. To the west of the application site lies the urban area of Nuneaton and includes the A47, which connects through to the A5 to the north of the site. These site photos show various views around the site. The site is surrounded by agricultural fields to the west, and Harrowbrook extends through the site on the northern and western sides of the site. The land is gently sloping, with the vast majority of the site falling from south to east, to northwest, with the very gentle fall inland from the farm towards the eastern corner of the site. The farm can be seen on that photo in the middle of the site. The context of the site includes industrial and commercial development immediately beyond the A5, as well as residential development. These photos show the agricultural buildings associated with Padge Hall Farm. These buildings are proposed to be demolished. This is the illustrative site layout plan. Shows the existing access on the A5 will be upgraded to serve the development. There are 5 units of varying scales. Detailed permission is sought for Unit 1, which is the largest B8 unit and has an intended occupier. The landscaping buffers surrounding the site equate to approximately 49% of the whole site. This shows Unit 1 in more detail. It's approximately 200 metres from the A5. It will have a maximum height of 18 metres. The floor space proposed is approximately 55,000 square metres. Service yards are proposed on both sides of the unit, with a staff and visitor car park towards the front of the site, towards the A5. As mentioned in the previous slide, there's service yards to each side elevation, as shown on the top 2 elevations. The materials would be secured through a condition, however, the building would be banded, as you see within various employment developments, for example, Magna Park. The bottom elevation shows the proposed office block, which would be sited nearest to the A5. Since the publication of the report, there's been a further letter received from Syncrion, which is the Unit 1 occupier, and they've reiterated their will to stay within the area, but that their business needs to expand to match their customers' growth. They contest that the benefits of the scheme should be considered, including the A5 improvements. The applicant has also sought deferral of the application to January committee to resolve outstanding highways objections. However, it is not considered that there will be a resolution to achieve this within the time frame. Legal advice, as detailed within the report on the highways reason for refusal 3, has been sought, and it does not alter the committee report. In terms of the principle of development, this is split into 3 elements. The application is located on the edge outside of the Rugby urban area, within the countryside as defined by policy GP2. Therefore, development will only be permitted where national policy permits. In terms of the location, the proposed development location does not align with the spatial strategy of the borough as set out within the local plan, and therefore it conflicts with policies GP2 and ED3. Although the site is not within a defined settlement boundary and is contrary to the local plan policies in relation to the spatial strategy, it is within close proximity to highly sustainable settlements of Hinckley and Leeton. Therefore, is not classed to be an unsustainable location in relation to proximity to services. It is considered that therefore the development should not be refused on the basis of it being within an unsustainable location. In regards to employment need, the amount of land required for the remainder of the local plan for employment uses equates to 55.7 hectares of land. The application site seeks to approve 63.8 hectares, of which 53 hectares is within Rugby. As such, the granting of planning permission would nearly exceed the requirements of of policy DS1, with still 10 years remaining of the local plan. It should be noted, however, that policy DS1 does not set out a maximum. The HEDNA, which is the Housing and Economic Distribution Needs Assessment, which was published this month, does set out a wider need for employment up to 2041. There is therefore a need for B2 and B8 development above that of the local plan. However, this is to be considered through the local plan review. In terms of alternative sites, the application is EIA development, therefore alternative sites have had to be considered. It is considered that the assessment as set out within the officer report is acceptable and shows that there is limited sites based on various contributing factors. The proposals, therefore, are contrary to policies GP2 and ED3, so there is conflict with the spatial strategy. Therefore, they need to demonstrate that the overall benefits outweigh the conflict and any other identified harm within the planning balance. In terms of greenbelt, as I mentioned, a minor part of the site lies within the greenbelt. However, the drainage works would be classed as an engineering operation, therefore this is classed as appropriate development within the greenbelt. In terms of land designation and use, there would be a loss of approximately 63 hectares of agricultural land, of which some is best and most versatile, grade 3A. This harm is to be weighed within the planning balance. In terms of the parameters set out for the outline and the detailed design of Unit 1, it is considered that the application is acceptable in terms of the impact on the character and the design of the area, given the extensive landscaping proposed as well. In terms of residential amenity, the nearest neighbouring dwellings are a significant distance away. It is proposed that there would be no material adverse impact on these residential dwellings. The site is within National Character Area 72. It's a well-ordered agricultural landscape. As mentioned previously, extensive landscaping is proposed. However, there would be an urbanisation of the site, which would result in harm to the landscape, which is classed as a moderate/major adverse landscape effect. The nature of direct change on the landscape will be notable, and the magnitude of change will be high. This again will be weighed within the planning balance. It is considered that there are no detrimental impacts for pollution, trees and hedgerows, ecology, flood risk, heritage and archaeology as detailed within the officer report. In relation to highways, a transport assessment, framework treatment plan, technical notes and rebuttals have all been submitted and reviewed by the highway authorities and the planning authority. In relation to policy D2, the parking for unit 1 complies and the parking for the other units will be considered at reserve matters stage. There is a footpath adjacent to the existing access which is proposed to be diverted, and Warwickshire County Council have no objection to this. In relation to this scheme, the highways authorities are National Highways, Leicestershire County Council and Warwickshire County Council, as the application is a cross-boundary application and involves the strategic road network, i.e. the A5, and the local road networks. Highways conversations have been ongoing since May, when the original reasons for refusals were proposed, and dialogue has been ongoing with the applicants. However, there is currently no resolution to these conversations. This diagram here shows the proposed access to the site. National Highways have no objections to the scheme, and this no objection relates to the access onto the A5, the amendments to the Dodwells roundabout, and the impact on the strategic road network. Warwickshire County Council and Leicestershire County Council maintain their objections to the scheme, and they've recommended 3 reasons for refusal. The first being that a safe and suitable access for all users has not been demonstrated. The proposed site is anticipated to lead to significant pedestrian demand, and the current proposals do not satisfactorily accommodate for this. The second reason for refusal being the failure to demonstrate that the significant impact on the transport network in terms of capacity and congestion can be mitigated. Lowering of the A5 carriageway would open up the road for higher vehicles, and this is considered not to have been sensitivity tested correctly by the highways authorities. Therefore, the impact is not known. The modelling with the current sensitivity test shows significant rerouting onto the local road networks, for which the mitigation proposed is not sufficient. The third reason for refusal is based around the safeguarding of the A5 improvements. The local highway authorities consider that the scheme will prejudice future improvements. However, the local planning authority does not consider this to be a valid reason for refusal based on the evidence as detailed within the officer report. In terms of the planning balance, harm has been identified in relation to the proposal being contrary to the spatial strategy, there being a loss of agricultural land, including best and most versatile, urbanisation of the site creating a moderate/major landscape harm, a safe and suitable access for all users not being demonstrated, and highway mitigation proposed for the development is inadequate. In relation to the benefits, as summarised within the officer report, in relation to the economic benefits, there would be job creation. For Unit 1 alone, that would equate to approximately 800 jobs. For the wider site, it is approximately 2,500. There would also be a contribution to local centres based on the workers using both Hinckley and Nuneaton services. Business rates would also be generated from the development in the region of millions per annum. For the social benefits, the job security links to health and well-being. In terms of environmental benefits, there is approximately half of the site proposed for landscaping. Pedestrian linkages are proposed, as are electrical charging points and sustainable urban drainage systems. The benefit of the lowering of the carriageway under the A5 railway bridge would also be a significant benefit. On balance, it's considered that the identified benefits do not outweigh the proposed harm in relation to highway safety and mitigation of significant highway impacts. The harm on the wider highway network would outweigh the proposed localised highway benefit of lowering the A5 carriageway under the bridge. Therefore, it is considered that this application should be refused in accordance with the agenda.
Right, we'll move on to the planning agent next, and then we'll open up the debate. Thank you. You've got 3 minutes. Thanks.
First test. Sorry about that. The application is for an employment proposal, as we've heard, which would deliver up to 2,500 jobs, and it would also provide a site to enable Syncrian, a local employer, to expand, who without this site's availability would be forced to relocate out of the area. There are no local sites available to them. The investment required to deliver the scheme would exceed £200 million. The committee report acknowledges the sustainable nature of the site, and it recognises the environmental, economic and social benefits. Crucially, the location of the site in the A5 corridor is important because the corridor is identified as part of the strategic growth plan. The A5, being a very important route serving a national hinterland, is managed by National Highways, who have been closely involved in the deliberations regarding the highway and transport components of the application. Their conclusions, submitted to the Council in September, are that the scheme will deliver, quote, substantial betterment to the A5. And this is in part due to the fact that the development will provide a solution at its own expense to the existing problem at the railway bridge, which crosses over the A5 and which is struck by an HGV on average once a fortnight. Now, the A5 partnership of local authorities, which includes Rugby Council, have estimated that each time the bridge is struck, there is a £20 million impact on the local economy. So if it's struck once a fortnight, that means £500 million a year off the local economy investments. Land is also reserved for the future dualling of the A5, as we saw on that plan earlier. Yet the application comes before you with a recommendation to refuse on local transport grounds. An examination of these reasons suggests that concerns remain regarding the provision of footpaths, including along the A5, and the potential for some additional traffic using Nuts Lane in Hinckley. Our assessment shows very minor changes on local roads, and neither Warwickshire nor Leicestershire is claiming a severe impact, which is the key test of the MPPF when regarding decisions based on transport matters. Now, the required road safety audits have been submitted and approved by National Highways, as has a walking, cycling and horse riding assessment. The planning balance, we think, pits all these advantages, jobs, investment, environmental benefits, substantial improvements to the A5 against very local concerns. And in this regard, we respectfully request that the determination of this application is deferred for a further meeting to take place with the highway authorities, which has in fact been arranged for the 19th of December. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Right, have we any questions to the speaker? Could I get you to speak to that? Thank you. Okay. Okay, so we've got a suggestion from the speaker that this is deferred till the next meeting.
I'm a little confused, and I may be aligning with what you've just said, and again, it may be down to inexperience in the chamber. And I'm looking at 2.2 of the report, where we still have Hinckley and Bosworth Borough Council and Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council who haven't resolved whether to determine their elements of the application yet. It's almost as if like, we can do half the story, but not the other half of the story. And notwithstanding the objections from county council colleagues at Warwickshire and indeed at Leicestershire, it's almost as if we only have half the story tonight. And I suppose the question is, what's the rush? If there is meeting on the 19th, I'm looking to officers. I think I'm looking to you, Ella, and thank you for, again, an excellent presentation, and indeed to Richard for some sort of clarification. But I may be the only one in the chamber doing so, but I am struggling with the why, if you like, this evening. Sorry. Thank you.
For you, Chair. Yes, so there's not a rush as such. This application has been in since September last year. As I mentioned, there's been very detailed conversations since May with the applicant and the highways teams surrounding the highways matters. So they have been discussed at length. There is a meeting on the 19th that both highways authorities have agreed to attend. However, from speaking to them, it seems that, well, to defer to January, it wouldn't resolve anything as such. Because there may be a resolution, but it will take longer than a month, so it would not be heard at January committee. But no, there's not a rush as such. It's just the highways authorities have considered a lot of evidence for this application, and there has been a lot of dialogue back and forth, and they consider that this is their final position on the current application. And in relation to, the cross-boundary, so yes, Nuneaton and Hinckley have not yet taken theirs to committee. We are the lead authority as such because we have the majority of the site. Each authority can only determine the area of the site within their administrative boundary. So I know that Hinckley are set to take theirs this month as well. Nuneaton, I'm not too sure. I think theirs will follow probably after because they just have an element of the landscaping on the side of the site. But we have to consider the application that is in our area and determine it.
Thank you. I'm still not 100% sure, but I understand what you're saying and perhaps the complexities of planning policies. I think Richard might be coming in. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, possibly it may be important perhaps bringing the County Council. They may be able to explain, why they feel that perhaps, they've reached their sort of point in discussions where they feel it's not going to go any further in the immediate future, and hence why we've then brought the application before you. Thank you.
So we will go to the highways officer, if we can, please, just to clarify that and just see where the stumbling block is, because clearly there is a stumbling block. And we want to move forward somehow.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I'd just caveat that I've not been involved in this particular application, so I've sort of been briefed on it. My understanding is that there has been modelling work undertaken, but that is some way off still being agreed between ourselves and Leicestershire. National Highways don't seem to have an objection, but we are concerned about the impacts on our local highway network. I don't believe we've seen any mitigation come forward for any impact that there may be, and that includes the lowering of the bridge, because what's been looked at or what's been put forward to be looked at doesn't necessarily take account of the wider impact that you might get from HGVs potentially rerouting and redistributing to the A5. So again, that needs to be looked at in terms of the nearby local highway network, our network, as opposed to National Highways, and obviously Leicestershire County Council. My understanding is that given where we are now, we are unlikely to be in a position to give more of a positive response by the next committee. You're probably looking more sort of February, March committee before we're there, because it'll have to go through the modelling process.
So yes, just to expand on that, it is complicated because there are 3 highways authorities. So there is National Highways, Leicestershire and Warwickshire. So in terms of the modelling, they all have their different modelling software. Thank you. I'm not a highways engineer, as you can see. But yes, they have their different modelling software. So the Warwickshire County Council software has been run, but there is an element of the scheme that is not within that software. So that's the A47 long shoot impact. National Highways, they've also had their modelling software run, and they're considering that there's no impact on the strategic network. So that's the A5 and any other motorways surrounding that area. Leicestershire County Council, they've also had their PRTM model run, and they consider that there is an impact based on that. So all the models as well are linked in a way. So that's why Warwickshire and Leicestershire have similar issues, because the outputs of those models are joined. So from a Warwickshire point of view, it's considered that because an element is linked to Leicestershire's model, that they can't fully assess the impact on the Warwickshire network, and that's why they consider that currently there is that impact on the local network. So just to be clear to members, National Highways have said they are fine with the impacts on the strategic network, but it's the local highway authorities that have an issue with the impact on the local road network. So that would be Nuneaton mainly and Hinckley.
Okay, just before I bring you in, Councillor, I'm going to ask a point of clarification to our planning agent. Clearly, you've been involved in all the discussions with the local highways. Is that so? And if so, what is the stumbling blocks from your perspective?
The National Highways confirmed their absence of an objection in September this year. So we'd been working with them with our transportation consultations for 6 months, trying to understand what their views were on impact. Following their conclusion that they had no objection, and clearly part of that is the resolution of the railway bridge problem, they looked at the whole of the A5, including footpaths and everything else, in terms of road safety. And that's the critical part, I think, of their response. The road safety audits have been carried out. There's a thing called the walking, cycling and horse riding assessment, which has also been carried out and approved. Now, there is, as Ella has said, there's a different model, transport model for Warwickshire, a different one for Leicestershire. So these models, which are trying to predict what might happen in the future, have been run, and they've tried to come together, and it's not yet clear from the Highway Authority's point of view what the right answer might be. We understand that there is still concern about footpaths on the A5 itself, although National Highways are not concerned about that. And we understand that there might be concern about traffic using Nuts Lane in Hinckley, okay, which might be seen as a link between the A5 and the A47. Currently, and we've run the PRTM model, our consultants have done all that, we've done VISIM models and all the other bits and bobs that traffic engineers are supposed to do. Currently, there's about 650 vehicles in the peak hour on Nuts Lane. Okay. This scheme would change that by adding about 45 vehicles. So that's the scale of the difference and the impact, which, as I understand, not a traffic engineer, I understand is the concern. There's 650 vehicles at peak hour now. That'll be increased by another 45 as a result of two things: the development and attracting more high-sided HGVs to the A5, because they can now get underneath the railway bridge and don't have to go through the residential areas. It seems to me that there is such a major complicated issue here that it would be grossly unfair on the applicant to refuse the application on the basis of safety when we know the road safety audit's been done. And if we refused, clearly we'd have to go to appeal, which would take everybody into huge expense and time.
Okay, I want to stop you there, because you're just straying off the point of clarification. We've got that. Now, I've got to ask you just one more question. Now, this is a point of clarification, because you mentioned about the meeting that you're likely to be having on the 19th of December. Now, what advantage will that meeting have? Will that actually clarify things and get it sorted, or are we still going to be in a stalemate situation?
Well, I hope not, because the purpose of that would be to check with the highway authorities, Warwickshire and Leicestershire particularly, together with you as a local planning authority, precisely what the concerns are. Because I think it's all very well to say, well, we've got some modelling issues, but what does that mean? Pragmatic, does that mean there's a problem on Nuts Lane at Hinckley or somewhere else? We need to understand, I think, precisely what issues are at stake. Why do they feel so strongly that they're recommending a refusal of such a major application and putting 2,500 jobs at risk? We hope that that would bring that out. I understand. We hope that that would bring out at that meeting precisely what their concerns are, and we can then go away and address them.
Okay, now we've got Councillor Srivastava. He wanted to speak first.
I think, as Councillor, I'm also confused a little bit where we stand. There are a lot of things, a lot of information is not there, and we are going to make decisions. So as you have explained to me how it affects the recommendation, that's the officer's point of view.
Put it on. Thank you, Jen. Yeah, I'm tending to agree with the applicant's agent. I do feel there's a little, a bit of sort of make a decision in haste and repent at your leisure in this one. And I would like both authorities, Warwickshire and Leicestershire, to be singing from the same hymn book. The other thing, looking at the site, I mean, I did think probably the applicant hasn't been as diligent as we have on some of the other schemes that we've looked at, where we have very large state sheds that become the landscape. And that's my a big concern with this one. It seemed to be sparsely treed or landscaped properly compared with other schemes this local authority has approved, where we've had very great deal of cooperation for the applicant in trying to break up the form and mass of a large development of this kind by good tree planting. So I think there's still a lot more work to be done on this application before it's ready for this committee.
So are you making any recommendation there?
I recommend deferment at this time.
I second that.
Okay. Councillor Slinger.
I'd like to second.
Yeah.
May I?
Can I just bring the officer in first? Thanks.
Yes, so as detailed in the officer report, the character and appearance of the unit, by Unit 1, which is detailed, has been considered. The wider scheme is for an outline application, so the details we do not have of those units, but the illustrative plan does show that 49% of the site would be landscaped. We don't have the exact details of what a lot of, well, that would be considered at reserve matters stage, so we wouldn't consider that through this application anyway. It would be about a year down the line probably. So it is considered that the impact of the development on the character in the area or landscaping, that has been considered in full and is detailed in the officer report. The only outstanding matter at the moment is highways, and is relayed in the reasons for refusal. It is a fact that it's a failure to demonstrate reason, so it's not a it would have an unacceptable impact. It's a failure to demonstrate in terms of the modelling that there would be significant mitigation for those impacts. So yes, a lot of people have mentioned that we haven't got enough information, but the reason for refusal is a failure to demonstrate reason, one of them anyway. The other relates to the...
Joe, I don't think, well, we've got a moment. We haven't got enough mitigation for the development.
Right, we've got Councillor Richard Holt.
Sorry, Chair. Just to clarify one point, it was just so members are aware that both Warwickshire County Council highways and Leicestershire County Council highways are on the same page, and they are both at the moment objecting for the same reasons. So just I wanted to confirm that.
So we've got Councillor Slinger was going to say something.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to say that it strikes me that the potential benefits being so great by way of jobs and so forth would suggest to me that anything that can be done to try and find a way to make what is a highways issue, trying to find a way to resolve something like that should be considered. I'm not saying that it can definitely be considered, be achieved, but it strikes me that we should make every effort possible to try and resolve something which seems to me to have the potential to be resolved.
I can take it from that then. You're
second
supporting
deferment.
Yes. So we deferment. So we've got a proposer from Councillor Sanderson and a seconder from Councillor Slinger or Councillor Sivastava for deferment. Okay, we want to vote on that. Before we put it to the vote, can I just make a comment to the county highways? Can you make sure you all get your heads together and get this job sorted, you know, once and for all? If you've been talking since May, come on, let's get the job sorted. You know, we've got Councillor Mystery.
I'm sitting on the rear view office. Chairman, back to again, highway again. They need to get their act together, yeah, because listening to the developer and echo what Councillor Slinger said, reading at the, you know, the positive side of it and the, you know, the economic side of it, yeah, and I would have gone further, like saying how many of those jobs are for the local economy around the surrounding and the skill base that Coventry and the area represents in the heart of the engineering world. You only got to look at the history of the engineering. So I would defer it because I'm not swayed one way or the other, yeah, because I'm not in a position, you know, to do that today. But given the opportunity, the highways to get together, I find it very difficult not to reconcile with some of the positive side of it, yeah, today. But once we're convinced with a highway, sit down with the developer and resolve it. Thank you.
Okay, so we've got a proposer and a seconder for deferment. All those in favour, please show. Well, that's unanimous. We move on to the next item for consideration. That's land south of Bailey's Lane, Long Lawford, and we've got Ruth.
Good evening, everybody. This application has been deferred to committee in accordance with the scheme of delegation, as there's been concerns that the application fails to comply with condition 5 of an outline consent granted in 2019, which restricted the approved dwelling to a single-storey height, and also for concerns over the design and future use of the roof space. The site has been brought to committee once before and withdrawn at the last minute due to concerns over land ownership issues. I can now advise the committee that all of these concerns have been properly addressed. The necessary paperwork has been done and the necessary notices both served and advertised. So here we have the site location plan. It's located within Long Lawford and within the settlement boundary. Bailey's Lane's a short road that slopes upwards from School Street to the east, joining with Main Street to the west. There's only one other dwelling within Bailey's Lane, which sits opposite to our application site. This is a view of the site from Bailey's Lane. As you can see, it's situated above the adjacent highway and the land level matches with the height of the wall in this photograph. Since the photograph was taken, the applicant has removed the hedging. The plot in question was originally part of the rear garden space for numbers 12 and 4 Main Street. So here we have a view down along Bailey's Lane with the application site here. And in this photograph, we can see the only other property in Bailey's Lane, which, as you can see, is a small, low-level bungalow. Again, this photo attempts to show the height of the land, and this is the photo of the site looking towards the rear of the properties in Main Street. For clarity, these photographs have now been included to show the hedge has been removed. So here we have looking from the top of the site, and here is the wall with the hedge gone. So this shows a withdrawn scheme from 2021. One of the reasons for the committee call-in was because an approved outline application had a restrictive condition to secure a single-storey dwelling. However, this would have only been enforceable through the submission of a reserved matters application, which would have been required to comply with that condition. All of the applications that have since come forward have been for full planning permission and therefore are required to be determined as standalone applications. There have been different iterations for the site. The first scheme, which, as say, shown on this slide, had only excavated part of the site for parking, with a dwelling sitting atop the existing land level, and following officer advice, this was withdrawn. This next scheme that came in, again, the land level hadn't been addressed, and so this application was refused, as the height of the dwelling would have still been too high. So this is now the original plans on the current scheme that we're considering tonight. You can see there's a dormer, there's roof lights in the roof. And at the section at the bottom, you can see that the land has now been fully excavated. Whilst this was welcomed, the inclusion of the dormer and roof windows still raised concerns and was one of the reasons for it being called into committee. The scheme has now been amended to this. As you can see, the proposed dwelling's been substantially altered, the roof height's been lowered and the design changed from gable to hipped. All roof lights and the dormer have been removed. The plans show a painted render finish with brick coin details. However, details for the new dwelling will be secured by condition 3. Here we have the proposed floor and section plans. The section to the bottom left is through the site from north to south, and the section to the bottom right shows the site looking across the front orientation from east to west. The rear garden level will be retained, and so the garden will be elevated above the main dwelling, but a 2.2 metre high fence is to be erected for boundary treatment around the garden area, which will help to provide an acceptable level of privacy. The site plan has also been amended to show where the retaining walls would be to hold back the land, to provide clarification and address residents' concerns, and they would be where these yellow lines are. Key considerations: the principle of development, the property is located in the main rural settlement of Long Lawford and within the existing boundaries and is supported by policy GP2. The character and appearance: in terms of character, the proposed scheme is now more in keeping with the other dwelling in Bailey's Lane. The roof is hipped and the dormer and roof lights have been removed. 5 neighbour objections have been received. The main concerns have been in relation to the potential to convert the attic space. Condition 14 will remove permitted development rights for the new dwelling, and as such, any future proposed changes that might come forward will need to be assessed by the local planning authority. Overlooking and loss of light concerns have been mitigated by the excavation and lowering of the land level, as well as the substantial alterations to the design of the dwelling. Parking and highways. County Council highways have not objected, subject to highway conditions 9, 10, 11 and 12, which have been applied. And in addition, condition 13 has been applied to secure on-site parking in perpetuity. Technical consultees, Ecology have requested conditions to secure a scheme for nesting boxes and enhancement measures, and these have been applied and will need to be discharged prior to commencement of the work. Environmental Health have also requested an informative to restrict operational hours during the construction period for unexpected land contamination and a condition for air quality mitigation all prior to commencement. A late consultee response from the tree officer has been received, and conditions have been requested for a biocultural method statement to protect the retained trees and for final specification of all proposed hedge planting to be submitted and approved in writing by the planning authority. It's requested that members agree to delegate authority to officers to include the requested conditions should the application be approved. On planning, the planning balance, the proposal is located within the main settlement of Long Lawford, and the principle of development is acceptable. The scheme would respect the scale and character of the surrounding area, would not adversely affect the amenities of occupiers of the neighbouring properties, and would not have a detrimental impact upon highway safety. All matters relating to biodiversity, air quality and highways have been secured by condition, and subject to this, the scheme complies with the local plan and national planning policy framework. And the recommendation is to approve subject to conditions. Thank you.
Right, thanks Ruth for that presentation. Sorry for the delay. Right, let's go straight over. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. This is a much improved layout of the one we saw when we went on the site visit some time ago. It was very much sort of mountain goat territory, wasn't it, if members remember? But I think the officer and the applicant have come forward with a very good scheme now. I would include the recommendation of the arboreal officer into the recommendations that are before us, and therefore I move it for approval, Chair.
Councillor Willis.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's reassurance I'm looking for at this point. And I fully understand, acknowledge that we must look at each application on its own merit. But the history of this, of the planning history of this site has caused significant consternation within the community. And I suppose this evening I'm just looking for reassurance that if by some chance the roof was used as a second floor, which has been the issue, that we would be robust in terms of addressing that in terms of enforcement. I need just to reassure residents there that that is the case. This does have a history. Thank you, Ruth.
Through you, Chair. Thank you for your question. I fully understand the concerns. The current design of the roof now being hipped, it would make it extremely difficult to use it for accommodation without, putting in roof lights and other alterations, and also in terms of accessing up there. So, as I say, the dormer's been removed that would have had a staircase in it, and also the roof lights. And with the removal of the permitted development rights, they wouldn't be able to install any roof lights or dormers or make alterations to the roof without applying for planning permission. Therefore, if work was attempted to do that, we could enforce because it's been conditioned, and we would move quickly to get our enforcement team out there to stop any attempts to do that.
Thank you, Ruth. Very helpful. Thank you, Chair.
So we've got a seconder for this, or any further speakers? Okay, we've got a proposer, Neil Sanderson, and seconder, Councillor Mystery. All those in favour, please show. And that again is unanimous. Excellent. Right, we're slowly going down the list. We should get home before midnight, I think. But we've got the next item is land north east of Castlemound Way. Castlemound Way, that's Rugby off the Leicester Road there. And we've got Paul Varnish to present.
Thank you, Chair. The application is brought before committee as it is a major planning application. It's a full planning application for a storage and distribution unit under Class B8 use with ancillary offices, a gatehouse, associated car parking, HGV parking and associated landscaping and infrastructure. The application site is located within Coton Park to the north of the borough. Regarding the site context, number one shows to the north of the site is the established Coton House residential development. Two is the application site will be positioned adjacent to the M6 motorway to the north. Three shows to the west is the Coton Park Business Employment Park. Four is to the southwest the Coton Park residential housing estate. 5 is running from north to south is Newton Lane. 6 is the red oval depicts the application site, and 7 is the village of Newton. The planning authority have received representation from one neighbour, the ward councillor, the parish council, and the Pegasus Group, acting on behalf of AC Lloyd, the owners of the residential development land located directly adjacent to the south of the site. The neighbours' main concern was highway safety and traffic movement. The ward council is not opposed to the development in principle, but wanted to be sure that any impact on the school was fully considered or mitigated against. The parish council does not object to the principle of development of the site. However, it must be clearly demonstrated that this would not compromise its intent to provide for the balanced and sustainable economic growth of Rugby. The parish have requested a contribution towards the 5 Arches wildlife site and for a condition to be included securing local employment opportunities during both construction and operation. The skills condition has been included. The contribution towards a 5 acres wildlife site will be addressed later in the presentation. The Pegasus Group advise that they have no objection in principle to the application, having regard to the layout and proposed hours of use. However, they wish to ensure that such housing development within the adjacent site and the amenity of future occupants is not unduly impacted by the operations resulting from the development. The key issues to consider when determining this application are the principle of the development, character and design, residential amenity, highway safety, parking, flooding and drainage, landscape, ecology and archaeology. There are also other matters that need addressing and the need for planning and obligations to ensure the development is acceptable. Regarding the principle of development, the application site is located within the open countryside, adjacent to the urban edge. The application site has been allocated for employment use under policy DS4 and DS7 of the local plan and the Coton Park Eastern Master Plan supplementary planning documentation. This is illustrated within the plan to the right-hand side. The purple area, which is the application site, is allocated for employment use. The area below, the pink area, is allocated for residential. Policy DS7 states employment development in this location should be provided to meet the qualitative demand for smaller units in the range of 5,000 to 50,000 square feet in B1C, B2 and ancillary B8 employment uses. A hybrid planning permission has already been granted for 8 smaller employment use units. At the time of the master plan's adoption, the planning inspector had requested that the policy should allow for flexibility and that planning policies should avoid the long-term protection of sites allocated for employment where there is no reasonable prospect of a site being used for that purpose. The development strategy team have been consulted and knowledge from the supporting information provided by the applicant that there is demand for larger B8 units. However, they have also sought advice from the Coventry and Warwickshire Local Enterprise Partnership, who maintain there is still a demand for smaller units. The applicant has advised that there is no reasonable prospect of the site coming forward for the allocated use after 2 years of unsuccessful marketing due to a plethora of deliverability issues applicable to smaller units and arising from the infrastructure costs of opening up the site. The applicant details the challenges associated with the significant upfront cost to enable works and infrastructure. Means that a significant portion of the site, approximately 80 to 90%, would need to be pre-let to make it deliverable. Potential occupiers have been wary of committing to the scheme, with the key issues being the cost of acquiring a new pre-let unit and the uncertainty and reliance of coordinating multiple companies and interested parties in delivering the scheme and rising construction costs. Typically, occupiers for smaller units acquire existing buildings. There is an interest from a larger size unit for a larger size unit from an existing company which is currently located within Central Park. Nevertheless, if they chose not to move, the evidence provided by the applicant indicates there is a regional and national shortage and demand for larger B8 units. The site's location relative to the M6 Junction 1 and the strong economic geography of the site that sits on the motorway network at the very heart of the golden triangle of logistics has been the principal factor driving market interest in the site. The applicant considered the delivery of the site is only realistic for a large single unit delivered on a pre-let basis, as currently proposed. There is an unmet demand for B8 units in the Rugby Borough, and there is flexibility in the wording for policy DS7 that allows for development differs from the explicitly stated in the policy if there's no realistic prospect of smaller units being built or occupied. Just on another note, this plan also indicates how the vehicles will access the M6 of the A426, which is the dotted yellow line. In terms of the site layout plan illustrates how the development will be positioned within the site. To the west is the staff parking. Number 2 shows the main building. The main building would be positioned closer to the northern boundary to provide a separation gap between the future residential properties to the south. The separation gap will help prevent the impression of the building being overbearing. To the south, is the HGV parking. To the west is the access road. And 5 shows on the boundaries the existing and proposed landscaping. The tree and landscape officer has been consulted regarding the application. The officer has reviewed the arboricultural and landscape information submitted and has raised no objection to the proposed development, subject to a condition regarding tree protection and a condition for the implementation of soft landscaping. And 6 just shows again the future, to the south, the future residential development. The above is an illustration of the proposed development. The building is relatively large in terms of size and scale, standing at 18 metres in height. However, this is not unusual for a building of this type and use. The smaller picture provides details of the proposed finish. Its horizontal bands of grey. The darker grey at the bottom will create a solid visual base with a lighter white colour to the top, creating a softer contrast with the sky. The entrance lobby and other entrances will be finished in pastel orange to contrast with the grey finish. Similar finish has been successfully used elsewhere within the borough and throughout the country. The top illustration demonstrates the positioning of the building. The future residential property will be on a higher ground level. The illustration also shows the potential separation distances that can be achieved between the unit's boundary and the future residential properties, being approximately 39 metres. The landscape will also help provide screening and break up the hard edges of the building. The bottom illustration shows the unit will be positioned at a lower overall level in comparison to the existing employment buildings, which you can see to the left. The environmental health team have been consulted and reviewed the relevant documentation to include the air quality assessment, noise impact assessment, lighting details, construction management details, and matters relating to contamination and demolition. The environmental health team have raised no objection, subject to the inclusion of conditions and informatives. Regarding the concerns raised by the Pegasus Group on the adjacent future residential development, the environmental health officer considered that the mitigation provided within the noise impact assessment was proportionate and satisfactory for the development. Any potential impact on the residential amenity of these future residential development sites will be addressed once the reserve matters applications have been submitted to the local planning authority by the residential developer. I've previously stated that there is a current application on here for 8 smaller units. The agent has provided a plan to enable a comparison between the approved live application for the smaller mixed-use hybrid units and the current proposal. The positioning and massing of the buildings is very similar, although the smaller units provide space and gap in between them. It is therefore considered that the proposed development will not have an overly adverse impact regarding the visual amenity of the development in comparison to the current approved application. Regarding highways, the application is accompanied by a transport statement to include details of parking provision, trip generation, traffic impact, pedestrian and cycle facilities, and public transport facilities. Apologies about this. Warwickshire County Council initially objected to the development and requested additional information regarding trip rates, car parking and HGV vehicle movements. On receipt of the information and a road safety audit, Highways reversed their response of an objection to the proposal to one of no objection, subject to conditions. National Highways also provided an initial response of an objection, which was also reversed to one of no objection on receipt of the additional information. The development is therefore considered to be acceptable in regards to highway safety. The proposed parking provision does not meet the D2 parking facility standards as advised by the LPA within the local plan. Within the transport statement, the applicant has advised that the level of car parking provision is considered appropriate by the proposed occupier. It is noted that the parking standards do not take into account commercial vehicle parking standards, and the provision will be considered on the basis of individual planning application. At the request of Highways, the applicant has submitted additional information to include a parking accumulation assessment. Highways has reviewed the additional information and are satisfied that the level of car parking provision is likely to be sufficient for the current intended occupiers. A condition will be, number 27 will be included that any future occupiers will be required to submit a parking monitoring and management plan to ensure that any overspill parking does not take place in locations where such parking would be severely detrimental to the safe and effective operation of access routes to and within the site. The provision for disabled parking spaces, electrical charging points and cycle storage is also considered to be acceptable. The Public Right of Way team requested the applicant secures the correct legal agreement for the diversion and for conditions to be included within the decision notice to ensure the footpath remains open and usable. The lead local flood authority, flood risk assessment and drainage strategy were consulted regarding the proposed development in relation to surface water, drainage and associated flood risks grounds, and they have raised no objection subject to a condition. The Environment Agency have advised that they have no comments to make. Severn Trent were consulted and provided no comments. Any matters relating to this application in connection into the public foul water sewer would be the responsibilities of Severn Trent and the applicants. Warwickshire County Council Ecology Unit have been consulted and initially raised concerns in relation to ecological protection and enhancement of the site, been similar to those submitted for the previous application and not accurately reflecting the impact of the current proposal. The applicant has provided additional information which again ecology have considered to be acceptable. The Parish Council has requested a financial contribution towards a 5-acre site, a locally designated wildlife site, which is part of the larger Great Central Walk, managed by the Parish Council in partnership with the Butterfly Conservation Society. The Ecology Unit have advised that it may be possible to secure funding and provide a biodiversity offset site as required by the Biodiversity Net Gain, providing it complies with the necessary requirements as stated within the Section 106 agreement. This will be the responsibility of the Parish Council and Ecology to arrange. Warwickshire County Council Archaeology have raised no objection to the proposal, providing the development is built in accordance with the archaeological method statement and mitigation strategy. And Warwickshire Police, the Fire Service and Candant, which is National Grid, have raised no objection subject to informatives to be included within the decision notice. Planning obligations have been sought by the local planning authority to mitigate against the impacts of the development and make the development acceptable. National Highways and Warwickshire County Council have requested financial contributions towards highways improvements, public transport services and to enable the making of traffic regulation orders. And Warwickshire County Council Ecology have requested a financial contribution to provide a biodiversity net gain. In conclusion, it is considered that the development is in principle acceptable and provides the employment provision as required under the Coton Park Master Plan and the policy DS7. It addresses the material planning considerations to include the character and design, impact on residential amenity, highway safety, parking, flooding and drainage, landscape, ecology and archaeology. It is considered to meet 3 overarching objectives of sustainability, to include the economic, social and environmental objectives. The planning obligations set out in Section 106 agreement will address adverse impacts of development, ensure it's acceptable in planning terms, and finally the proposal complies with the local plan and MPPF. The recommendation is for the Planning Committee to approve the application subject to conditions and informatives, for the completion of a legal agreement to secure the necessary financial contributions and or planning obligations, and for the Chief Officer for Growth and Investment be given delegated authority to make minor amendments to the conditions and informatives. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Just one thing to add on to the recommendation is also for the normal delegation to the Chief Officer for Growth and Investment to negotiate the Section 106 and sign it off in consultation with the Planning Chair.
Right, Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. I think I must be on the same page as Newton and Biggin Council, Parish Council, when they describe this as a monolithic single structure. And I am concerned that I can see why they want to do what they want to do in terms of getting everybody under one roof in terms of a development. But these sheds are so large, as they, like I said earlier, they become the landscape. Can we not, perhaps, with the advice of your boring officer, look to break up the form en masse by putting in coppices of trees along the format, just to break it down a little more, just make it not so oppressive in its size and shape?
Through you, Chair. The landscape officer has been consulted on this. There is some existing landscape there now. What will happen is they will retain the existing landscape and they will provide further landscaping. In terms of whether any more could go in, I think it would. I think they probably can do that's probably as much as they can do. I wasn't so sure whereabouts you'd want any more to go.
Well, if you look at it, it's a long structure, isn't it? You can break that long structure down by planting coppices, say 30 odd trees here and there, so it isn't the most dominant feature on the landscape.
That's a difficult one, though, is Councillor Sanderson. Well,
A professional can advise.
Well, the problem is when you plant trees within the development, then you're in real problems. Then because it's been designed to sit right low in the ground, so the trees and the landscape is surrounding the outside.
Yeah, sorry, I have looked at this, and sorry, I didn't realise I was going to be questioned on it tonight, and it's been quite a long time since I looked at it. But I think given the existing topography and the existing tree cover within the hedgerows, because it's quite undulating countryside, so the way the ground levels kind of go downwards, don't they? Kind of south of the motorway, and the way the existing hedgerows kind of crisscross each other, and the existing landform provides existing screening, and from memory, there's going to be fairly significant landscaping around the perimeter as well. I think I do remember there's quite a large gap adjacent to the M6 with no landscaping there at all at the moment. But I think we did ask them to kind of provide additional landscaping to fill that gap in as well.
Right. Councillor Lawrence.
I think my question's around a little bit around condition 27, which is around parking. If I recall that road well, I've known there to be anything up to 50 HGVs parked down that road. It's almost unpassable. It's a single track road. Those HGVs are not local. They are up there to spend the night along that road. There is no parking prevention along that road. There is bollards to stop you being able to park on the pavement, but therefore there are HGVs on the road. There is a parking restriction you're putting in at the very, very end of that road, but there's no parking restriction all the way down that road. So can that be adjusted, that parking monitoring, to be around the road itself as well as the site? And it's a question I'm asking at this point.
Thank you, Chair. I have no answer to that question because I have not been briefed on this particular site. I was aware of problems in that area, but sorry, I can't help on that one.
Richard could comment on that.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. I mean, as members may recall, with regard to existing parking problems, and that would be really a matter for the Highway Authority to look at, perhaps through traffic regulation orders, if there's evidence to show that it is a problem. I have also been up there and I've witnessed trailers without tractor units attached to them, so they obviously aren't just momentarily parking there. So that may be something that the Highway Authority needs to look at separately to this particular application. With regard to the parking monitoring management plan, it has to obviously relate to the application and the impact of this particular application. It can't potentially deal with existing problems. So there may be recommendations that come from without that within the immediate area, but I think with addressing some of the other issues along that road, along Castlemount Way and round to Central Park, is probably another matter outside of this remit to address, and for the Highway Authority to look through traffic regulation orders. Highway Authority, please contradict me if you wish. But
Could I just add to that as well? Sorry, for you, Chair. There is a current scheme on there that's live, which they could build. It's got the 8 units on. I appreciate that would have different vehicle movements and different vehicle types, but the amount of vehicle trips is greater with that than the proposed development. So although, like I say, it's a bigger unit, there'll be less vehicle trip or potential vehicle trips compared to what's already been approved.
Councillor Mystery first, then.
Yeah, Chair, just add to what Councillor Lawrence has said, that as part of the planning approval, a condition be put in that it be looked at it, and not just walked away today, yeah? That it part of the recommendation that the Highway Authority look at the whole of the, exit to the new site and the current one. Because I went on Saturday, and it doesn't matter what you do. I know it's existing, but it's only going to get exacerbated by having more lorries. When they're kicked out, they can't travel, and they're going to park outside again. So can that be looked at it by Highway as a part of the condition, please?
Just through you, Chair, we're not able to condition on a planning application for the Highways Authority to do something. We can make representations to them to look at it and take away the comments from tonight. We can't put a condition on requiring Highways to do something.
Councillor Eve Hassel.
I must apologise to the Chair. I am actually the ward councillor for this area, not Alison Livesey. I had a letter from Paul Varnish on the 16th of June giving me the details of this. We've also had meetings at Newton and Biggin Parish Council, and we have looked into this. We didn't have an objection to this plan. I just wanted to put it on the record that Alison is not the ward councillor for this area.
Okay, have we got anybody to make any further comments? Councillor Bill Lewis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's good to see that Newton and Biggin Parish Council will get some benefit in the financial contribution towards the Five Arches wildlife site. At least that's, I don't know any of you have been there, but that's quite it's a very excellent site. And I feel a bit of an affinity with the site because when I was Mayor 3 years ago, I officially opened that site and planted a tree there. So any kind of benefit that can come into it would be, from my point of view, would be excellent.
Grow like your beard.
And the, no, this is for Santa.
This is Santa.
The other thing was that the problem with the parking, lorries parking and so on, I thought certainly one of the advantages that we were told of having this new service area at Junction 1 was that it would take all the lorries off the roads and they could park there overnight. But that doesn't seem to be happening. Thank you, Chair.
Have we got any further speakers? Have we got no approvals or... Councillor Lawrence.
I'm not sure we have actually resolved that last question, right? So I think I would like some direction. We understand we can't instruct through this highways, but are we agreeing that we will be separately raising that concern? Is there a informative we can put in this in some way that connects the two together?
Yes, just come back on that, Councillor Lawrence. We can certainly raise the matter with the Highway Authority through a sort of more formal process. That's fine. I mean, yes, as part of the informatives, we can make reference to, particularly in light of Condition 27, that they may wish to consider looking at some of those existing issues. But I think the difficulty, because it's beyond our application site, and I don't know if the landowner, how much they own of that area, whether or not they have much power over and above what perhaps the Highway Authority can impose. So, but we can certainly put it to the Highway Authority and see, because what I don't know, and I don't think the case officer knows, is who actually owns which bit of roads, because I know sometimes they are private, and seeing if we can manage it that way. But it would be obviously outside the main thrust and remit of this application. But I hear what members are saying.
Hasn't come on. I would like to approve the motion as written, plus if we can add to your direction and informative just to connect the two things. And not my understanding is separately we will be raising something with highways on this matter.
Thank you. And are you happy to delegate to the officers to draft that informative?
I am happy to delegate.
Thank
yes.
you.
Okay, while we're on highway issues, I've got to make it absolutely clear, especially to our County Council Highways officer, that Junction 1 is the most important junction to this town, because it's going to be carrying all the HGV from the almost newly forming Southwest Rugby development. If they go north, they're going to be coming up the A426 and they'll be going over Junction 1. That island is under constant repair. It's absolutely torn to pieces with the HGV movements. And the problem is, if there's a hold-up on that road, the traffic stacks up all the way back through the town, and we get rat running all through the northern villages. So that road, the whole network up there, has got to be looked at and maintained to a very high standard in order to keep this town flourishing. If you can take that back, please. That's most important. I believe we got a proposer and we have a seconder, didn't we? Who seconded? Okay. So all those in favour, please show. Once again, that's unanimous. Right, we're moving on down the list, would you believe? We've got Sam next with 41 King Edward Road, Rugby.
Good evening, everyone. This presentation is for application R220694 at 41 King Edward Road in Rugby. This seeks to amend R181153 to increase the floor area of Units 6, 8 and 10 to incorporate the unit approved under R200916 with associated external appearance amendments. This application is being reported to Planning Committee in accordance with 5.23I of the Scheme of Delegation for applications recommended for approval when the Highway Authority raise an objection. Here we have the site images that show the site prior to its demolition. The image on the left shows the prior building which fronted the highway, and behind this, as can be seen in combination with the aerial image, the scale of the building which extends in a western direction into the site. The above site images show the site as existing, which is now demolished. The two images also demonstrate the character of the area in proximity to the site, which is mainly residential, constructed of two-storey terrace rows, with fewer examples of two-storey semi-detached dwellings. Northlands Primary School is also situated in proximity to the site, and due to the site being situated near the northern junction with Manor Road, the rear elevations of the terrace row on Manor Road face the site, which can be seen on the right-hand image. This development does have an expansive planning history, and as this forms a material consideration in the planning balance, it will now be demonstrated the timeline of the planning applications. Unfortunately, the first application was missed in the Officer Reports planning history table, and therefore I'll begin with this. Outline permission was approved at committee against the highways objection for 10 residential units with landscaping reserved, and within the slide the indicative design and the floor plans are included. In 2018, another application was submitted and recommended for approval at committee by the council with a highways objection again. This was for the demolition and construction of 10 one-bed apartments. This time it was a full application, which also did receive a non-material amendment to create a consistent roof profile, height, and change Unit 3 and 4 to a 2-bedroom duplex apartment, which can be seen there. These further applications, there were 2 further applications that altered the front of the building, with the first application being a prior approval change of use from office to a dwelling house, and then a further application for the erection of a 2-bedroom duplex apartment. This also included elevation drawings. I understand the planning history has gone through a number of stages, therefore to summarise, the 10 units have been approved under an outline and a full application, and the extent permission floor plans are situated to the left-hand side. To the right-hand side, there's been a change of use from office to dwelling house, and then conversion of dwelling house into duplex apartment approved, which would front the highway, and the 10 approved units to the left. So just to demonstrate, that floor plan on the right-hand side there would sit on this part of the floor plans on the left and front the highway. This in combination would then result in 11 units across the combined developments. So this proposal would result in a loss of 1 unit in comparison to the completion of the currently extant permissions by extending the 3 units and consolidating the space, as can be seen in the floor plans above. So to clarify, the left-hand side of the red lines were the original 10 units, and to the right-hand side are for the extra units, and then we have the consolidation of the space to extend 6, 8 and 10. The original submission in this proposal proposed sinks, standing seam cladding, a blank front elevation and large windows which face the rear elevations of the neighbouring properties. This was determined to be an out of character in design and thus detrimental to the street, and therefore was amended to the amended design, which uses brick and timber cladding in line with the previous approval, and includes street-facing windows, which brings the design in character with the residential of the street scene. While this elevation is on, the only change in scale will be the slight change of the roof profile and pitch. The access and the width of the building does not change. The site plan is the same as the original proposal, and would result again in a net loss of 1 unit in comparison to the previously approved applications, thus requiring a reduction in parking. In terms of the consultation process, there was no third-party representations. There was, however, 1 objection received by Warwickshire County Council Highways. The key considerations are the principle of development. The proposal is located in the Rugby urban area, which is the main focus for all development. In terms of character and design, the proposal has been amended to include windows which contribute to the existing architectural features within the street scene, and the materials also amended from the standing seam zinc to timber cladding and brickwork, which creates an acceptable uniform aesthetic across the whole development and is therefore considered acceptable within the street scene. Again, the scale of the proposal does increase slightly, accommodating a larger roof, which in turn alters the pitch. Although the roof pitch somewhat differs from those within the street scene, it is not considered to be significantly detrimental, and again would create a more harmonious design across the development. The impacts on residential amenity are to be weighted against the potential impact from the previously approved permissions, which provide a fallback position for the development. Therefore, the main increase in potential harm would be the windows added to the north-facing elevation and the impact on the rear elevations of the terrace row on Manor Road and the potential loss for privacy. This is indicated using the existing site image, as the proposal would be positioned into the previous building, which is now demolished. Under amendment, windows were moved onto the east elevation in order to create an acceptable design, and some of the harm was alleviated. There would still be a window required on both the ground floor and first floor unit, which would face the dwellings on Manor Road. The ground floor, though, would be mostly screened. The acting agent has amended these windows to be screened louvres, which are shown in the slide. The case officer does accept that the windows do not entirely remove the subsequent impact. However, due to the level of obscurity and the windows acting as a light source to the rooms, the inclusion of this window type is considered acceptable and will be safeguarded under condition to remain in this manner. Highways did respond with an objection. Just to summarise, this was due to one-way vehicle movements, insufficient manoeuvring space, a request for further information, a statement of insufficient parking space size and bin storage. Just to comment on the bin storage, Work Services did not raise an objection in relation to the bins and waste. The case officer does not dispute the Highways' reasoning for objection, but he does recognise that this is in accordance with the application R181153, which was approved at committee. So therefore, the history of the site and the previous planning approvals, the potential impact to the highway must be weighted against the quantum of development proposed as part of this proposal only, and not as a whole new development as the previous applications are extent. In assessment to this, the only increase in scale, again, is the proposal of, to change the roof height, and in turn, a creation of a net loss of 1 unit with a consolidation of the unit approved under R200913 into the extensions of units under R181153. It is therefore considered on balance that the proposal does not propose a development which is significantly more detrimental than the prior applications that have been approved, and therefore should be recommended for approval in consistency with previous decisions. In conclusion, the proposal is acceptable in principle and through amendments to design is considered acceptable. Impact on residential amenity has also been addressed through amendment, and with the inclusion of the obscure screened windows would not be considered significantly detrimental. No public objections were received, and all technical consulting matters have been addressed apart from the Highways objection. The leading highway authority retains their stance of objection in accordance with the approved R181153. Again, in assessment of this, the development within this proposal would not be seen to add any further impact to the highway, as it only increases the height, therefore not adding any harm to the access. The proposal also has potential to reduce the highway's concern through a loss of 1 potential unit, thus reducing the intensification. Therefore, the application is considered acceptable by the case officer when assessed against the planning history for the site, which does form a material consideration. It is therefore recommended that this application should be approved subject to the conditions which will be carried from the previous approvals to ensure the site is appropriately developed as required by technical consultees.
Right. Any comments? Councillor Sanderson.
Yes, Chair. This one takes me back. I was involved 20-odd years ago with the flats at the front of this development on Manor Road. So I do know the site very well. My concern is, whilst Work Service haven't objected to the site in terms of waste control, where are you going? Where are the bins going to be put on the highway on emptying day? Is there a sufficient area there to store the bins along there? Because it's right on the junction, isn't it?
Yeah, it is slightly further back from the junction than the ones on Manor Road, if you're talking about the ones directly
just certainly slightly.
Yes,
Yeah.
I would agree it is in proximity to the junction. The this is obviously with the planning history where it can become quite complicated. We wouldn't be able to consider the bins of the 10 approved units because they've already been approved.
Right.
So what we would in turn be assessing is the loss of one potential unit. These obviously are all still potential because we can't guarantee that the developer carries out any part of the works. But what this development does, just to summarise again, I know it's quite complicated as it is quite an expansive planning history, is it, instead of there being 11 units considered as 10 and 1 together it would be 11, it would in fact extend the 10 units into the one development. So the actual harm in terms of the waste, if it is a harm which wasn't established under the previous application, would actually be less than.
Yeah, my concern, Chair, is we had not a dissimilar problem on Caldecott Street a while back. And there was an area where it was designated the bins will be put on collection day. And it solved the problem. And that's what I'd like to see on this, that there is an identified location for the bins for collection on bin day.
I understand the point you're making. I think the difficulty here is we're only considering the extension of 3 units, so we'd only be designating an area. So I understand the point you're making, but we're only looking at the extension in relation to 3 of the units, so you'd only be designating an area for 3 of the bins. You wouldn't be designating for the whole development. So it's a bit of a tricky one to try and put a condition in there. And I'm not sure there's a workable area for it anyway.
Yeah, just to try and repeat again, the main point of this application, to reduce it down to really what it actually is just an extension. The principle for these units, I do take your point on what you...
I understand the technical point that you're making, but an informative saying the bin should be put here would not be difficult. Yes,
Work Services did place an informative on. I would have to go back through the officer report. I believe that was to present the bins curbside.
Okay, well, I don't mind moving this application from the chair. You have a seconder on that, Councillor Adam Daly?
Yeah, I'm happy to second that.
Okay, let's. Any more recommendations, or can we move to the vote? Okay, let's move to the vote then. All those in favour of approval? Okay, well, that's unanimous again. That's all the applications dealt with, and we've got item number 5 on the agenda is advance notice of site visits. Is that noted?
Yeah, I have none to mention.
Okay. Right, item number 6, and we've got the tree preservation order at Stretton-under-Foss with David Gower.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. Something a little bit different. Tree preservation order number 426 in relation to land adjacent to 3 Main Street in Stretton-under-Foss. Come on. So a provisional tree preservation order was made on the 27th of July of this year in respect to 2 mature oak trees, reference T1 and T2 on the plan to the right, located in a wooded area on land adjacent to 3 Main Street, Streatham Foss. Following an objection from the landowner of where the 2 trees stand, it is the decision of the planning committee to decide whether the order is permanently confirmed or not. Background, the TPO was served in response to the receipt of a planning application, reference R220440, which is still yet to be decided, for the erection of 1 new dwelling on land adjacent to 3 Main Street. The trees were not considered within the planning application. The proposed footprint of the property is located 6.5 to 7 metres away from T2 at its nearest point. So on the plan to the right, the trees are just kind of... Does that come through? No. But just to the left of the... the proposed footprint to the south-west. Therefore, the proposed dwelling would be directly within the root protection area and canopy spread of the tree. Potential for an adverse impact on the tree's roots and canopy. Therefore, the tree officer raised an objection to the plan application and a TPO recommendation was put in place. Case for confirming the TPO. The trees form a highly significant visual amenity. They contribute positively to the overall landscape character of the local area. Trees are approximately 120 years old. Without a TPO in place, the trees could be removed, which would have a detrimental impact upon the landscape, local landscape character. Negative impacts on public amenity, wildlife habitats and biodiversity. The trees display good form and vitality with no major external signs of disease, decay or structural defects. The trees are highly visible from Main Street as seen in these 2 pictures and obviously form a highly prominent feature, about 25 metres tall. That is another view from Main Street, just a little bit further up the road. That's the road leading down to Brinklow. And as you can see, the trees form, you know, they're characterful of the local landscape. Trees obviously on the other side as well. So we had 1 objection from the owner of the land, asking why the trees are worthy of preserving from an amenity point of view. It makes reference to the trees having dead wood in them. Also makes reference to the tree preservation orders being put in place to prevent residential developments. The trees are typical of others in the locality and do not have any significant merits for TPO. And the family have owned the site since the early 1980s, and there's no desire on their part to fell the trees. TPOs are used to protect selected trees and woodlands if their removal would have a significant negative impact on the local environment and its enjoyment by the public. The amenity value is assessed using the tempo method, which is included within your reports. This is a tool for assessing suitability for TPO based on a number of criteria, including condition, expected retention span, relative public visibility and level of threat. All trees are a material consideration in the planning process. The trees have not been considered within this planning application for the site, and as such it is highly likely that an adverse impact may arise given their close proximity to each other. The trees are located 2.2 metres apart, have grown symbiotically with each other and form one whole canopy unit. There is some sporadic, moderate and major deadwood and ivy in the trees, which is quite common for mature oak trees. But other than that, the trees are in good condition, no major defects noted. Remedial works may be prescribed to remove any deadwood or ivy. The TPO does not prohibit good tree management. So the options for the planning committee, as we said at the beginning, is to confirm the tree preservation order without modification to the schedule. 2, to confirm the tree preservation order with modification to the schedule, or to reject the TPO. So my recommendation to the planning committee is that the TPO is confirmed without modification. And Chair, just Streatham under Foss Parish Council did email me yesterday, and they do support the TPO. So, thank you.
Right, thanks to David for that report. And we've got Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. Can I support the officer's recommendation on T1? It is a mighty oak. It provides habitat. They can provide habitat for up to 400 different species. So it's a very important ecosystem in its own right. I'm glad to hear the parish council also back it having a proper TPO on it. So on that basis, I'd like to support the recommendation, Chair.
Okay, we've got Councillor Bill Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree completely with what Councillor Sanderson said, and I'd like to second that.
If it's any use to you, I can remember when those trees were only half that height. That was well over half a century ago. Right, so we got. Well, that was really funny, though. Yeah. So we've got a Councillor Daly.
Yeah, so I was just going to add, thanks for the report, David. Yeah, on the tempo evaluation for tree preservation orders, it gets a score of 17, and 16 plus is apparently definitely merits a TPO. So I think that sounds like this definitely merits a TPO.
Councillor Mystery.
No, nothing. Just somebody who's new to the game. What's our council policy regarding preservation? If it is, I don't know. I have no objection. I'm not.
As we said, trees are a material consideration in the planning process, so I will get consulted on most planning applications where trees are involved, as I'm sure you've heard my name mentioned throughout the evening. And we will consider the impact of trees on development. If a tree is worthy of protection, we'll protect it on amenity grounds. It doesn't necessarily mean that development's not necessary there. It just needs to be examined in more detail through a coherent tree survey and tree arboricultural method statement and all the rest of it.
Can we move to the vote then? We're all in favour, please show. Yep. That's another one. That's unanimous. Right, then we move on to item 7, which is the delegated decisions. Now that is noted. Excellent. And while we're still on the air, may I thank all the officers for coming along, especially Karen, who's been sitting there patiently answering all those questions. So hope you get in time and don't get told off by the family. Okay. Yeah. Yes. That's right. Can we? And David, all the officers, yes, and David as well. Yeah.